Story 1.
My sister-in-law announced she was moving into our guest house temporarily after her divorce. 6 months later, she changed the locks, redecorated with my furniture, and was charging her friends rent for Airbnb stays on weekends. When I confronted her, she laughed. "Your husband said I could stay as long as I want. This is my space now." My husband backed her up. "She's family, stop being selfish." I just smiled sweetly. The next morning, a moving truck, 2 police officers, and a real estate attorney arrived at 6 a.m. She came running out in her robe, screaming. The attorney handed her an envelope. "Ma'am, this property deed shows." Let me start from the beginning, because you need to understand exactly how we got here, to that glorious morning when Jessica came running out in her silk robe at 6 in the morning, mascara-streaked face twisted in rage, screaming at 2 police officers and a real estate attorney who weren't having any of it. It started 18 months ago on a Tuesday evening. I remember because Tuesdays were my favorite. I'd finish my remote work around 5, make something simple for dinner, and my husband Mark and I would watch old sitcoms until we fell asleep on the couch. Boring? Maybe. But it was ours. Mark's phone rang just as I was pulling the lasagna from the oven. The kitchen smelled like garlic and basil, and I was already planning to save him the corner piece with the extra crispy cheese. I heard his voice change in the living room, that particular tone he used with his family. Careful. Diplomatic. Exhausted. "Jess, slow down." "What happened?" I set the lasagna on the cooling rack and wiped my hands on my apron, listening. Through the archway, I could see Mark pacing, one hand pressed to his forehead. "He did what?" A pause. "No, of course you can't go back there. Look, give me a second, okay?" He appeared in the kitchen doorway, phone pressed to his chest. His face had that apologetic look I'd learned to recognize over 8 years of marriage, the one that meant his family needed something, and he was about to volunteer us to provide it. "Jess and Derek are getting divorced," he said. Derek apparently cleaned out their joint account and moved his girlfriend into their apartment. "Jessica has nowhere to go tonight." My stomach clenched, but I kept my voice level. "What about her parents?" "Her dad just had hip surgery. They're in that tiny condo in Florida now, remember? There's no room." I could already see where this was heading. I glanced through the kitchen window at our guest house, a converted garage apartment we'd finished renovating just 3 months earlier. We'd poured $20,000 into it, new floors, a kitchenette, a bathroom with heated tiles. I'd spent weeks picking out every detail, imagining my mom staying there when she visited, or eventually turning it into a home office. "She can stay in the guest house," Mark said, reading my silence. "Just for a few weeks while she figures things out. She's my sister, Claire. I can't leave her on the street." And what could I say to that? "No, your sister who's been publicly humiliated and financially devastated by her trash husband can't stay in our perfectly good empty apartment?" I'd sound like a villain. "Of course," I heard myself say. "Tell her she can come tonight." Mark's whole body relaxed. He kissed my forehead. "You're amazing. It'll just be temporary, I promise." Famous last words. Jessica arrived around 9 that night with 4 suitcases, 2 boxes, and red-rimmed eyes. She was beautiful even in crisis, the kind of woman who looked elegant in yoga pants and a ratty college sweatshirt. Where I was average height and perpetually fighting my wavy brown hair into submission, Jessica was tall, blonde, and naturally graceful. She'd been a dancer in college. It showed. "Claire, thank you so much," she said, hugging me hard enough that I could feel her shaking. "I can't believe he did this. 12 years together, and he just... I'm sorry, I'm a mess." "Don't apologize," I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. "Come on, let me show you the space." I walked her across our backyard. We had about half an acre, enough for privacy between the main house and the guest house, and unlocked the door. Inside, everything was exactly as I'd left it that morning after my final inspection. The walls were painted a soft sage green. The kitchenette had white subway tiles and brass fixtures. I'd hung sheer curtains that filtered the afternoon light into something golden and dreamy. "This is gorgeous," Jessica breathed, setting down her suitcases. "Did you decorate this yourself?" "Mostly, yeah. That dresser is from my grandmother's estate." I gestured to the vintage piece I'd refinished by hand, sanding away decades of varnish to reveal the original cherry wood underneath. "And the bed frame is from... It's perfect." "Really, Claire? I don't know how to thank you." Something in her voice made me look at her more carefully. She was smiling, but her eyes were cataloging every detail of the room with an intensity that felt almost predatory. I dismissed the thought immediately. She was traumatized, I told myself. Of course, she was taking everything in. Take all the time you need, I said. No rush. She hugged me again. This time, when she pulled away, her smile reached her eyes. You're too good to me, she said. The first month was fine. Jessica kept to herself mostly, leaving early for job interviews and coming back late. She'd stop by the main house occasionally to eat dinner with us, always bringing wine or dessert, always profusely grateful. She cried a lot those first weeks. I'd find her on the guest house porch sometimes, staring at nothing, and I'd feel terrible for every moment I'd been annoyed by her presence. She's going through it, Mark would say when I mentioned she'd been out there for 3 hours. Give her time. So I gave her time. Month 2, she got a job at a marketing firm downtown. She seemed lighter after that, more like herself. She started redecorating a bit, nothing major, just adding some throw pillows, a plant here and there. I didn't mind. It made sense that she'd want to make the space feel like hers. Just until I save up for a deposit on my own place, she assured me over dinner one night. Probably another month or 2. No rush, Mark said, squeezing my hand under the table. But there was a rush, actually. My mother was planning to visit in August for my birthday, and I'd promised her she could stay in the guest house. When I mentioned this to Jessica in early July, she looked genuinely distressed. Oh no, Claire, I completely forgot about your mom's visit. Look, how about she stays in your spare bedroom? That way she's right there in the main house with you guys. You'll get more time together. It was reasonable. It was even thoughtful. So why did I feel manipulated? Sure, I said. That works. Month 3 was when things started shifting in ways I couldn't quite name. Jessica began having her friends over, normal enough, except they'd stay until 2, 3 in the morning. Their laughter would drift across the yard, and I'd lie in bed resenting that I was being kept awake in my own home while my sister-in-law hosted parties in my guest house. Could you maybe ask her to keep it down after midnight? I asked Mark one morning after a particularly late night. They're just talking, Claire. She's been isolated for months. Let her have some friends over. I'm not saying she can't have friends. I'm saying I have a work presentation at 8 in the morning, and I need to sleep. I'll mention it, he said, but his tone suggested he thought I was overreacting. He didn't mention it. The parties continued. Then came the furniture situation. I walked into the guest house one afternoon to drop off a package that had been delivered to our main door, Jessica's name on the label. The door was unlocked, so I let myself in, calling her name. No answer. The place was transformed. My grandmother's dresser had been moved from the bedroom to the living area, now serving as a TV stand. The vintage mirror I'd found at an estate sale, the one I'd been planning to hang in our master bathroom, was mounted above the dresser. The throw pillows I'd carefully selected were gone, replaced by a completely different color scheme. The sheer curtains I'd loved had been swapped for heavy blackout drapes. What are you doing in here? I spun around. Jessica stood in the doorway, arms crossed, her expression somewhere between annoyed and defensive. I was dropping off your package, I said, holding it up like evidence. What happened to the place? I redecorated a little. Why? Jessica, that's my grandmother's dresser. I didn't say you could move it. You said to make myself at home. She took the package from my hands, not quite snatching but close. I thought that meant I could arrange things in a way that works for me. Unless this isn't actually my space? The way she said it, like I was being unreasonable, like she was the victim, made my jaw clench. But Mark's voice echoed in my head, she's family. She's going through something. Don't be selfish. It's fine, I said, my voice tight. Just ask next time, okay? She smiled, sweet and cold. Of course. Thanks for the package. I left feeling like I'd just lost an argument I hadn't even meant to have. Month 4, I discovered the lock situation by accident. I needed to grab a folding table we stored in the guest house closet. We were hosting my work team for a barbecue, and I needed the extra surface space. I walked across the yard like I had dozens of times before, tried my key in the lock, and it didn't turn. I tried again. Nothing. The mechanism wouldn't even engage. Mark. I called back to the house. Is your key to the guest house working? He came out, tried his key. Same result. Did Jessica say anything about the lock being broken? He asked. No. My heart was pounding now, adrenaline mixing with something darker. Mark, I think she changed the locks. Why would she change the locks? I don't know. Let's ask her. We knocked. No answer. I could hear music inside, She was definitely home. We knocked louder. Finally, the door opened. Jessica stood there in an oversized sweater and leggings, coffee mug in hand, looking irritated at the interruption. "What's up?" "Our keys don't work," I said, holding up my keyring. "Did you change the locks?" "Oh, yeah. I meant to tell you about that. One of my friends has a creepy ex, and she stays over sometimes. I just felt safer with new locks." "Why?" "Why?" I heard my voice rising and forced it back down. "Because this is our property, Jessica. You can't just change the locks without asking." I didn't think it would be a big deal. She sipped her coffee, unperturbed. "I mean, it's not like you need to come in here when I'm not around, right? I needed the folding table in the closet for today." "Oh." She disappeared inside for a moment and returned with the table. "Here. Problem solved." She smiled at me, that same sweet, cold smile, and closed the door in my face. Mark and I stood there in stunned silence. "That was unacceptable," I said quietly. "I'll talk to her." But when he did, Jessica cried. She apologized profusely, said she'd been feeling violated and unsafe after what Derek had done, that she wasn't thinking clearly. She offered to give us copies of the new keys but said she'd appreciate if we could give her a heads up before entering, since it was her living space now. Her living space? In our property that we owned. Mark came back with 2 shiny new keys and Jessica's assurances that it wouldn't happen again. He also came back looking at me like I was the problem for being upset about it. "She's dealing with trauma, Claire. Can't you try to be more understanding?" That night, lying in bed, I started making plans. Nothing concrete yet. Just thinking. Calculating. Month 5, the Airbnb started. I didn't notice at first. Weekend cars coming and going weren't unusual. Jessica had friends, and besides, I was trying to give her space like everyone seemed to think I should. But then our neighbor, Patricia, knocked on our door one Sunday morning. "Claire, I don't want to be nosy," she said, which meant she absolutely wanted to be nosy, "but is your guest house a rental property now? There've been different people there every weekend this month." My blood went cold. "What do you mean, different people?" "Young couples mostly. They check in Friday evening, check out Sunday afternoon." "I assumed you knew about it." I did not know about it. I waited until Monday when Jessica left for work, then used my new key, pointedly not telling Mark what I was doing, and let myself into the guest house. What I found made my vision blur with rage. The place looked like a boutique hotel. New bedding in pristine white. A basket of travel-sized toiletries on the bathroom counter. A welcome binder on the coffee table with information about local restaurants and attractions. And on the kitchen counter, a printed sheet with Wi-Fi passwords and checkout instructions, along with a handwritten note, "Thanks for staying. Please leave keys on the counter. Jess." She was running a rental operation out of our property. I pulled out my phone and searched Airbnb, filtering by our neighborhood. There it was. Charming private guest house near downtown. The photos showed every angle of the space I designed, decorated with my furniture, featuring my grandmother's antiques. The listing said it could sleep 2 to 4 guests. The rate was $150 per night. And according to the calendar, she'd been renting it nearly every weekend for 6 weeks. That was roughly $2,400 a month. Pure profit. On our property. With our utilities. Without permission. I took photos of everything. The listing. The welcome basket. The instructions. Then I called my husband. "Mark, we need to talk about your sister. Right now." He left work early. We sat at our kitchen table while I showed him the evidence on my phone. I watched his face cycle through confusion, disbelief, and finally a flicker of anger. "This has to be a mistake," he said. "Maybe someone's using photos of the guest house without her knowledge. Mark. Her name is on the listing. She's been doing this for 6 weeks. I'll talk to her." "No." My voice came out harder than I'd intended. "We both talked to her. Together. Tonight." That evening, when Jessica came home, we ambushed her. She saw our faces and immediately went on the defensive. "I can explain." "You'd better," I said. "I needed money, okay? Derek left me with nothing. The job barely covers my basics. I thought. I mean, the space was just sitting there empty most of the time. I didn't think you'd mind." "You didn't think we'd mind that you're running a business out of our property without asking?" My voice was shaking now. "You're charging people to stay here, Jessica. That's illegal without proper permits and insurance. If someone gets hurt, nobody's gotten hurt. Everyone's been great. Look at the reviews. She actually pulled out her phone to show us her 5-star ratings. That's not the point, Mark interjected. You should have asked us first. Would you have said yes? Jessica's eyes narrowed. Be honest. Claire's been looking for reasons to kick me out since day one. She counts the hours when my friends are over. She freaks out when I rearrange furniture. She treats this place like it's some kind of shrine. Because it's my property. I was standing now, hands flat on the table. My grandmother's furniture. My money that renovated this space. My house that you're exploiting for profit. Your husband said I could stay as long as I wanted, Jessica shot back. This is my space now. You gave it to me. The silence that followed was deafening. Is that true? I asked Mark quietly. Did you tell her she could stay as long as she wanted? His face went red. I said she could stay until she got back on her feet. I didn't mean permanently, Jess, come on, you said as long as you need. Jessica's voice was calm now, victorious. That's what you said. Your own sister was homeless, and you promised I'd have a place to stay. Claire, I'm sorry you regret being generous, but I'm not leaving. This is my home now. I looked at my husband. He looked at the floor. Stop being so selfish, he said quietly, and I felt something inside me snap clean in half. That night, I couldn't sleep. Mark had retreated to his office after Jessica stormed back to the guest house, and I lay in our bed alone, staring at the ceiling, feeling something cold and calculated settle into my chest where warmth used to be. I'd been patient, understanding, accommodating. And where had it gotten me? A sister-in-law who'd taken over my property, was profiting off my investment, and had somehow convinced my own husband that I was the villain for objecting to it. Fine. If they wanted to see selfish, I'd show them selfish. Around 2 a.m, I got up and went to my home office. I pulled out the file folder containing all our property documents. The deed. The renovation permits. The insurance papers. I spread them across my desk and started reading every word. The guest house was legally part of our property. Mark and I were both on the deed. Any rental activity required proper licensing and insurance. Jessica had none of these things. Moreover, she was operating a business on our property without our explicit written consent. If someone got injured during one of her Airbnb stays, we'd be liable. But beyond the legal issues, I found something else in those documents. Something I'd forgotten about. When we built the guest house, our contractor had technically classified it as a detached accessory dwelling unit for permits. Which meant it wasn't legally a separate residence, it was an extension of our primary home. You can't claim adverse possession or establish tenancy rights for part of a primary residence the way you can for a separate rental unit. Jessica wasn't a tenant with rights. She was a guest. And guests can be asked to leave. I pulled out my laptop and started researching. Tenant laws. Property rights. Eviction procedures. But more than that, I started calculating. What was this space actually worth to me? The furniture alone, my grandmother's dresser, the vintage mirror, the other antiques I'd placed there, was worth at least $8,000. The renovation had cost $20,000. If Jessica had been renting weekends at $150 a night for 6 weeks, she'd made roughly $3,600. Money she'd earned using my property, my furniture, my utilities. I wanted it back. All of it. But I also wanted something more. I wanted her to understand what it felt like to be used. To be dismissed. To have something you valued taken away by someone who thought they were entitled to it. I wanted her to hurt the way she'd hurt me. So I made a plan. Step 1, document everything. For the next 3 weeks, I kept meticulous records. Every time a different car pulled up to the guest house on a weekend. Every Airbnb guest that checked in and out. I took photos of the listings, screenshots of the calendar, copies of reviews mentioning Jess as a great host. I documented every weekend she was earning money off our property. I also went through our utility bills. Our water, electric, and gas had all increased significantly since Jessica moved in, not surprising since she was essentially running a hotel. I calculated her portion down to the dollar. Step 2, financial preparation. I had my own savings account that Mark didn't monitor closely, money I'd inherited from my grandmother along with the furniture. It wasn't a fortune, but it was mine, and I'd been careful with it. I transferred a significant portion to a separate account at a different bank. Then I made a series of calls to local attorneys who specialized in property law. The third lawyer I spoke with, a woman named Diane Morris, listened to my entire story without interrupting. When I finished, there was a long pause. "How vindictive do you want to be?" she asked. "Very. Good. I like you. Let me look into this, and I'll call you back." She called back 2 days later with a strategy that made me smile for the first time in weeks. It would be expensive. It would be complicated. But it would work, and more importantly, it would be legal. Completely, perfectly legal. Step 3: get Mark on board or work around him. This was the hardest part. Mark and I were barely speaking except for logistics. He slept in the guest room now, avoiding confrontation. He'd chosen his sister over me, and we both knew it. Our marriage was bleeding out, but neither of us was ready to acknowledge it yet. I tried one more time. Sat him down with the financial documents, the legal research, the evidence of Jessica's ongoing rental business. "She's breaking the law," I said. "We could be held liable if something goes wrong. And she owes us thousands in utilities and compensation for use of the property." "She's family," Mark said, like that explained everything. "So am I. I'm your wife. You're being vindictive." Maybe I was. But I was also being right. "Fine," I said. "But here's what's going to happen. I'm no longer paying for any utilities on that property. I'm no longer maintaining it. If she wants to run a business there, she can pay commercial rates for everything." "Claire, I'm done, Mark. I've been patient. I've been understanding. I've been the bigger person. And all it got me was dismissed in my own home. So either you help me fix this, or you stay out of my way. Choose." He chose to stay out of my way. Step 4: build the legal trap. Diane and I worked together over the next month. We sent Jessica a formal letter requiring her to cease all commercial activity on the property. She ignored it. Perfect. We sent a second letter documenting the ongoing violations and requesting compensation for unauthorized use. She responded through a friend who claimed to be a paralegal, stating that she had verbal permission from Mark to stay indefinitely and couldn't be forced to leave. Even better. We compiled everything. The Airbnb records. The utility bills. The property documents proving she had no legal right to operate a business there. The fact that she changed locks without permission. The lack of proper insurance or permits. Then we did something Jessica didn't expect. We filed for a partition of property action, which is usually used when co-owners want to split up a property they can't agree on. But in this case, we used it to establish the court's formal recognition that the guesthouse was legally part of our primary residence, not a separate rental unit, which meant Jessica's claims of tenancy were invalid. Diane also helped me draft something else. A document that Mark wasn't going to like but couldn't legally prevent, since he'd been unwilling to protect our joint property. I was exercising my rights as a co-owner to take action independently. The guesthouse would be placed under my sole management, with all decisions regarding its use, occupancy, and maintenance requiring only my approval. It took 6 weeks for everything to process. 6 weeks during which Jessica continued her Airbnb operation, completely oblivious to what was coming. She'd gotten comfortable. Arrogant. She'd stopped pretending to look for her own place. She'd started telling Mark's parents that we'd worked everything out and she was settled in her new home. Her new home. Built with my money. Decorated with my grandmother's things. On my property. Not for much longer. Step 5: execution. The night before it all went down, I barely slept. Diane had walked me through the timeline a dozen times. Everything was legal. Everything was documented. But I still felt sick with anticipation, that queasy combination of nervousness and grim satisfaction. At 5:30 in the morning, I got up and made coffee. Mark was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table in his pajamas. He knew something was happening today but not the details. I hadn't trusted him with them. "Whatever you're doing," he said quietly, "it's going too far." "What's too far?" I asked, pouring my coffee. "Protecting our property? Enforcing our legal rights? Or just refusing to let your sister steal from us anymore?" "She's not stealing. She's made over $8,000 running an illegal business on our property without permission. She's broken multiple laws and exposed us to massive liability. And you defended her. So yeah, Mark. This is happening." At 5:45, I received a text from Diane. "We're 5 minutes out." I went to the bedroom window overlooking the guest house. Everything was dark over there. Jessica was asleep, probably dreaming about her next batch of unsuspecting Airbnb guests. At exactly 6 in the morning, I heard the rumble of a large truck turning onto our street. Then another. I watched from the window as a moving truck, a large cargo van, and 2 unmarked sedans pulled up to our property. Diane got out of one sedan. 2 police officers got out of the other. From the moving truck, a team of 4 movers emerged, already pulling out dollies and equipment. The cargo van held a locksmith and a cleaning crew. I walked outside in my robe and slippers, coffee still in hand. Diane approached with a professional smile and a manila envelope. "Good morning, Claire. Are we ready?" "We're ready." The police officers approached. I'd met with them earlier in the week to explain the situation, that we had a guest who'd overstayed and was operating an illegal business, and we'd be executing a legal removal of an unauthorized occupant from our property. Everything was documented. Everything was approved. "Ma'am, we're here to keep the peace while you regain possession of your property," the older officer said. "Is the occupant inside?" "She is." "Let's proceed." Diane knocked on the guest house door. Firm, official knocks that echoed in the early morning quiet. No answer. She knocked again, louder. "Jessica Martin. This is attorney Diane Morris. I have a court order requiring you to vacate this property immediately. Please open the door." I heard movement inside. A crash. Swearing. Then the door flew open. Jessica stood there in a silk robe, hair wild, mascara smudged from sleep. Her eyes were still adjusting to the light, confusion and irritation warring on her face. Then she saw the police officers. The moving truck. Diane in her business suit. Me, standing calm and collected behind them, sipping my coffee. "What the, Claire, what is this?" "Ma'am, my name is Diane Morris, and I represent Ms. Claire Jensen regarding this property." Diane handed her the manila envelope. "Inside you'll find a court order establishing that this structure is legally part of the primary residence, and that you have no tenancy rights here. You're required to vacate immediately." "Vacate? Are you insane?" Jessica's voice was climbing toward hysteria. "I live here. Mark said I could stay. Mr. Jensen's verbal permission doesn't supersede property law, and it doesn't grant you the right to operate a commercial business without the co-owner's consent." Diane's voice was professional ice. "You've been running an illegal short-term rental operation, which violates multiple city ordinances and exposes the property owners to liability. You've changed locks without permission and refused to cease commercial activity after multiple legal notices. This is a lawful removal. This property deed shows that Claire Jensen and Mark Jensen are co-owners of this property, including all structures," one of the officers added, reading from a document. "You have no legal claim to remain here. We're here to ensure you leave peacefully." Jessica's face went from red to white to purple. "Mark!" She screamed toward our main house. "Mark! Get out here right now." Mark appeared on our back porch, looking like he'd aged 10 years overnight. He walked across the yard slowly, taking in the scene. "What's going on, Claire?" "I'm removing your sister from our property," I said calmly. "Like I told you I would. You can't do this. She has nowhere to go." She should have thought of that before she turned our guest house into an illegal hotel. I turned to Jessica, who was literally shaking with rage. "You have 15 minutes to pack essentials. The movers will remove everything else and place it in storage. You're not touching my things." "They're not your things," I said, my voice deadly quiet now. "The furniture is mine. The renovations are mine. Even the towels and sheets are mine. You came here with 4 suitcases. That's what you're leaving with." "Ms. Martin, I strongly suggest you cooperate," the younger officer said. "If you refuse to leave, we can arrest you for trespassing." "Trespassing? This is my home." "This is Claire and Mark Jensen's property," Diane corrected. "You are an unauthorized occupant engaged in legal commercial activity. Would you like us to also discuss the $8,300 you've earned through your Airbnb operation? Because we can absolutely pursue that in civil court." Jessica's mouth opened and closed like a fish. She looked at Mark desperately. "Do something." But Mark just stood there, hands in his pockets, looking at the ground. He'd realized what I'd known for months: he couldn't save her from this. She'd gone too far, and I had every legal right to do what I was doing. 15 minutes, I repeated. "The movers will be cataloging everything they remove. You'll get a detailed inventory. If you want to contest ownership of any item, you can take it up in civil court, but right now, you're leaving." Jessica looked at me with pure hatred. "You'll regret this." "No," I said quietly. "I really won't." The next 2 hours were chaos. Jessica screamed, cried, and threw things while packing. The police officers stood by, impassive and professional. The movers worked efficiently, removing every piece of furniture, every decoration, every item that belonged to me. They found my grandmother's dresser, the vintage mirror, 2 other antique pieces I'd placed there, all my kitchenware, bedding, curtains, everything. Jessica tried to claim some of it was hers. Diane pulled out receipts, photos with timestamps, even my grandmother's original estate inventory. Every single item was documented as mine. The antique dresser was appraised at $3,200, Diane said, showing Jessica the documentation. Would you like to explain how you came to own a piece from Ms. Jensen's grandmother's estate? Jessica had no answer for that. While the movers worked, the locksmith changed all the locks again. This time, only I got the keys. Not even Mark. By 8:30, Jessica was standing on our driveway with 4 suitcases, 2 boxes, and a face blotchy from crying and rage. Mark had retreated inside somewhere. He couldn't watch this and couldn't stop it, so he did neither. Where am I supposed to go? Jessica asked, her voice small now, broken. You have friends. Family. A job. I felt nothing looking at her. No satisfaction. No guilt. Just empty. You'll figure it out. You're resourceful, you managed to run a business without permission for months. I hope you're happy, she spat. You've destroyed this family. No. You did that when you decided to exploit our generosity and turn our property into your personal cash machine. A car pulled up, one of Jessica's friends, summoned by frantic texts. They loaded her belongings into the trunk while Jessica continued glaring at me. Mark will never forgive you for this, she said as a parting shot. Probably not, I agreed. But at least I'll have my house back. She left without another word. The moving truck followed, heading to a storage facility where everything would be held at Jessica's expense if she wanted to claim any of it, though we both knew none of it was actually hers. Diane stayed behind, handing me a folder of documents. Everything's documented here. If she tries to come back or causes problems, call the police immediately. We have a restraining order prepared if needed. Thank you, Diane. My pleasure. Honestly, I wish more of my clients were this prepared. She smiled. Most people wait until things get much worse before taking action. You were smart to document everything. After she left, I walked across the yard to the guest house. It was empty now, echoing. The walls were still sage green. The floors were still beautiful. But it felt different. Cleaned. Reclaimed. I sat on the floor in the middle of the empty room and cried. Not from guilt or regret. From exhaustion. From the release of months of tension. From the realization that I'd just blown up my marriage to protect a piece of property. But it wasn't just property, I reminded myself. It was respect. It was boundaries. It was refusing to be steamrolled by someone who mistook kindness for weakness. Mark and I lasted another 3 months. We tried counseling, but there was no coming back from this. He couldn't forgive me for how I'd handled Jessica. I couldn't forgive him for not protecting me in the first place. For choosing his sister's entitled demands over his wife's legitimate boundaries. You humiliated her, he said during one of our final arguments. She humiliated herself by breaking the law and exploiting us. You could have handled it differently. I tried for 6 months to handle it differently. You chose to side with her every single time. He didn't have an answer for that. We sold the main house and split the proceeds. I kept the guest house property in the settlement. It was in my grandmother's name originally, and Mark's lawyer agreed to let me have it if I gave him a larger share of the house sale. Fine by me. I live there now, actually. In the guest house. I brought my grandmother's furniture back, repainted the bedroom a soft blue, and turned it into exactly what I'd originally imagined, a peaceful, private space that's entirely mine. Some of my friends think I went too far. They say I could have been more compassionate, more understanding of what Jessica was going through. Maybe they're right. Maybe there was a universe where this ended differently, where Jessica respected boundaries and Mark backed up his wife and everyone lived happily ever after. But that wasn't this universe. In this universe, Jessica learned that family doesn't mean you get to steamroll people without consequences. And Mark learned that loyalty to your spouse matters more than enabling your sister's bad behavior. As for me? I learned that being kind doesn't mean being a doormat. That protecting your peace sometimes means burning bridges. And that I'm much stronger than I thought I was. The immediate aftermath was messier than I'd anticipated. Within hours of Jessica's removal, my phone started blowing up. Mark's parents called, furious and demanding explanations. Mark's brother sent a string of accusatory texts. Even some of our mutual friends reached out, Having heard Jessica's version of events, the one where she was a helpless victim thrown out on the street by her cruel sister-in-law, I'd prepared for this too. I sent a single group message to everyone who'd contacted me, attaching the legal documentation, the Airbnb listings, the utility bills, and a timeline of events. No emotional appeals. No justifications. Just facts. Jessica was operating an illegal business on our property without permission for 6 months. She earned over $8,000 while refusing to contribute to utilities or seek her own housing. After multiple attempts to resolve this privately, legal action became necessary. These are the facts. Believe what you want. Most people stopped texting after that. A few apologized. Mark's mother called me some names I won't repeat and hung up. His father sent a single text 2 days later, "You did what you had to do." She took advantage. That text meant more to me than he probably knew. The week after the eviction, I hired the cleaning crew back to deep clean the guest house. They found things Jessica had hidden: empty bottles shoved behind the water heater, damage to the wall where she'd hung something heavy without permission, sticky residue on my grandmother's dresser from tape she'd used to attach price tags during her rental operation. Price tags. She'd literally been selling the experience of staying in a space furnished with my family heirlooms. I sat on the guest house steps that evening, looking at photos of the damage on my phone, and felt the last traces of guilt evaporate. She hadn't just used the space. She'd abused it. She treated my property and my possessions as disposable resources for her profit. Mark came out of the main house as the sun was setting. We hadn't spoken much since the eviction. We'd been moving around each other like ghosts, careful not to make contact. "Can we talk?" he asked. "About what?" "About us. About what happens now." I gestured to the step beside me. He sat, leaving a careful distance between us. "Jessica's threatening to sue," he said. "For wrongful eviction or something. Her friend, the one who claimed to be a paralegal, is encouraging her. Let her try. Diane has everything documented. Jessica will lose and end up paying our legal fees on top of her own." "Claire." Mark's voice cracked. "How did we get here?" "You chose your sister over your wife," I said simply. "Every single time she pushed a boundary, you defended her. Every time I tried to protect our property and our marriage, you called me selfish. That's how we got here. I was trying to help my sister through a hard time. By sacrificing me? By letting her take over our home and run a business without permission? By telling me I was the problem when I objected to being used?" I turned to look at him. "Mark, when was the last time you defended me to her? Or to your parents? When was the last time you chose me first?" He couldn't answer. We both knew why. "I loved you," I said quietly. "I really did. But I can't stay married to someone who won't stand up for me. Who won't protect our home. Who thinks asking for basic respect makes me the villain." "So that's it? We're done?" "Yeah. We're done." He left the next morning with 2 suitcases of his own, heading to his brother's place temporarily. I watched him go and felt nothing but relief. The next few months were a strange kind of freedom. I'd wake up in the main house, still mine for now, until we finalized the sale, and walk across the yard to the guest house just to sit in the quiet. No unexpected guests. No parties until 3 in the morning. No one rearranging my furniture or changing my locks or treating my generosity like an entitlement. I started reclaiming other parts of my life too. I'd let so much slide during those 6 months of accommodating Jessica. Friendships I'd neglected because I was too exhausted to socialize. Hobbies I'd abandoned because I was too stressed to concentrate. My own mental health, which had deteriorated under the constant tension. My best friend Morgan came over one evening with takeout and demanded the full story. I told her everything, not the sanitized version I'd given to Mark's family, but the real version. The sleepless nights. The anxiety. The feeling of being gaslit in my own home while everyone told me I was overreacting. "I can't believe Mark sided with her," Morgan said, shaking her head. "Like, I know she's his sister, but you're his wife." "We're his wife," I corrected. "Okay, but still. There's helping family through a rough patch, and then there's enabling them to literally commit crimes on your property." That's what I kept trying to tell him. "So what now? Are you keeping the guest house?" "Yeah. It's mine legally, from my grandmother originally. Mark agreed to let me have it in the settlement." "Good. You should turn it into something amazing. Like a spike palace." I laughed, surprised I still could. "A spike palace?" "Yeah. Make it so beautiful and successful that everyone who doubted you has to see how wrong they were. That's the best revenge. She was joking, but the idea stuck with me. I didn't turn it into a spike palace, exactly. But I did turn it into something that felt like a reclamation. Once the divorce was finalized and I'd moved into the guest house permanently, I started making changes. Real changes, not just surface decorating. I expanded the office space, adding built-in bookshelves and a proper desk setup. I created a reading nook in the corner with a window seat and soft lighting. I hung my own artwork on the walls, paintings I'd done in college and hidden away because Mark had never liked them. I brought in plants, lots of them, until the space felt alive and breathing. And I started therapy. Real, intensive therapy to work through everything that had happened. Not just the situation with Jessica, but the patterns in my marriage that had allowed things to get so bad. The way I'd learned to minimize my own needs. The way I'd been conditioned to believe that standing up for myself was somehow wrong. You're not vindictive for protecting your boundaries, my therapist said during one session. You're not cruel for refusing to be exploited. Those are healthy responses to unhealthy situations. Hearing that from a professional helped more than I'd expected. 6 months after the eviction, I ran into Jessica at a coffee shop downtown. I saw her first. She was at a table by the window, laptop open, apparently working. I could have left. Should have, probably. But something made me stay. I ordered my coffee and sat at a table across the room. Eventually, she looked up and saw me. Our eyes met. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then she stood up, grabbed her laptop, and walked straight toward me. My heart started pounding. I had no idea what she was about to do or say. "Can I sit?" she asked. I gestured to the chair across from me. She sat. We stared at each other in silence for what felt like an eternity. She looked different. Tired. Less polished than before. But also, somehow, more real. "I'm not going to apologize," she said finally. "But I'm also not going to sue you. My lawyer, my actual lawyer, not my friend, said I'd lose and it would cost me a fortune I don't have." "Okay. I want you to know that I didn't plan any of it. When I moved in, I really did think it would just be a few weeks. But then it felt so good to have a space that was mine, after everything with Derek. And the Airbnb thing started as a one-time favor for a friend who needed a place to stay. Then I realized I could make money, and I didn't think about what it meant for you." "You didn't want to think about it," I corrected. "Because if you thought about it, you would have had to admit you were taking advantage of me." She looked away. "Yeah. Probably. Jessica, you changed the locks on my property. You took my furniture and used it to make money. You convinced my husband that I was the problem. How did you think that was going to end? I thought you'd just let me stay. You'd been so nice about everything else. I thought you were." She trailed off. "A pushover? Conflict averse," she said carefully. "I thought you'd keep giving in because it was easier than fighting. You weren't wrong. For 6 months, that's exactly what I did." "So what changed?" I thought about that. I realized that being kind doesn't mean letting people hurt you. And that sometimes protecting yourself means being the person everyone else thinks is mean. Jessica nodded slowly. "For what it's worth, I know I messed up. And I know I probably destroyed your marriage. I didn't want that. My marriage was already broken if it couldn't survive me setting boundaries with you." We sat in silence again. Then she stood up, gathering her laptop. "I hope you're okay," she said. "Really? I know you probably don't believe me, but I do." "I am okay," I said. And I realized it was true. "I hope you are too." She left without another word. I finished my coffee slowly, thinking about closure and forgiveness and whether I'd just experienced either of those things. I decided it didn't matter. What mattered was that I'd stood my ground, survived the fallout, and come out the other side intact. Epilogue. It's been a year now. The guest house, my house, is exactly as I want it. I work from home full-time now in an office space I built in the corner. I have friends over when I want, and the place is silent when I need it to be. My mother stayed here for 2 weeks last summer, sleeping in the bedroom while I took the couch, and it was exactly the peaceful visit I'd always imagined. Jessica, according to Mark's mother, eventually found a studio apartment across town. She's still working at the marketing firm. We've never spoken again, though I've heard through mutual acquaintances that she tells everyone I illegally evicted her, conveniently leaving out the part about her unauthorized business operation. Mark remarried last month, someone from his office. I saw the announcement on social media and felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no sadness, just mild curiosity about whether he told his new wife the whole story or just his version where I was the villain. The property where our main house used to be sold to a young couple with 2 kids. Sometimes I see them in the backyard playing, and I'm glad the space went to people who'll actually appreciate it. People ask if I have regrets. The honest answer is complicated. I regret that Mark couldn't see what his sister was doing. I regret that our marriage wasn't strong enough to survive setting boundaries with his family. I regret that it came to police officers and moving trucks at 6 in the morning. But I don't regret standing up for myself. I don't regret refusing to be taken advantage of. And I absolutely don't regret that moment when Jessica came running out in her robe, screaming at people who didn't care about her excuses, and finally understood that actions have consequences. The world tells women to be nice, to be understanding, to not make waves, to put family first, even when family is taking advantage. I tried that. For 6 months, I bent over backward to be the bigger person. And you know what I learned? Being the bigger person is overrated. Sometimes you have to be the person who says enough. The person who draws the line. The person who looks at someone taking advantage of your kindness and says, "Not anymore." So yeah, I evicted my sister-in-law at 6 in the morning with police officers and a moving truck. I reclaimed every piece of furniture she'd stolen, every dollar of utilities she'd used, every inch of my property she'd colonized. Was it dramatic? Absolutely. Was it necessary? For me, yes. Would I do it again? In a heartbeat. Because at the end of the day, I didn't lose anything that was actually mine to lose. I lost a husband who wouldn't defend me and a sister-in-law who saw me as a resource to exploit rather than a person to respect. And in return, I got my peace back. My space back. My self-respect back. That's not revenge. That's justice. And sometimes, justice looks like a moving truck arriving at dawn.
Story 2.
My cousin showed up to my wedding in a white ball gown, bigger and more elaborate than my dress. During my speech, she grabbed the microphone. "Sorry everyone, I just have to share, I'm pregnant with twins." The room erupted. Cameras turned to her. My aunt started crying tears of joy and hugging guests. My $80,000 wedding became her announcement party. My husband was shaking with anger, but I whispered, "Wait." After she finished her speech, I took the mic back, smiled at the crowd and said, "How wonderful. Since we're sharing big news." My cousin's face went from smug to horrified. Marissa and I grew up together. Same street, 2 houses apart. Our mothers are sisters, and they had this whole vision of us being best friends, sharing clothes, braiding each other's hair, all that storybook nonsense. Except Marissa never got that memo. From the time we were 5 years old, she made it her personal mission to outshine, outperform, and outright sabotage me at every possible opportunity. When I won the elementary school spelling bee in 4th grade, she cried so hard that my Aunt Linda, her mother, convinced the principal I'd been studying with advanced materials that gave me an unfair advantage. They made me share the trophy. When I made varsity soccer as a freshman, she spread rumors that I was sleeping with the coach. I wasn't. I was 14. But the whispers followed me all season, and parents looked at me differently. Coach Henderson quit at the end of the year. He had a wife and 2 kids. This wasn't normal cousin rivalry. This was scorched earth warfare, and I was always too shocked, too hurt, too confused to fight back properly. My parents would tell me to be the bigger person. Aunt Linda would say Marissa was just going through a phase or dealing with insecurity. I spent 23 years being the bigger person. My wedding day was supposed to be different. It was supposed to be mine. Just mine. One single day in my entire life where Marissa couldn't touch me, couldn't taint it, couldn't make it about her. I should have known better. The venue was this gorgeous estate in wine country, rolling hills, ancient oak trees, gardens that looked like they'd been painted into existence. My now husband James and I had saved for 2 years to afford it. $80,000. Every penny we had, plus help from my parents and his. The guest list was 180 people. The flowers alone cost more than my first car. I'm not materialistic by nature, but I wanted this one thing to be perfect. I wanted to look back on this day for the rest of my life and remember beauty, joy, love. The things that are supposed to matter. The morning started well. My bridesmaids, 4 of my closest friends from college, were giddy and supportive. We drank sparkling cider and laughed while getting our makeup done. My dress was simple but elegant, a fitted ivory gown with delicate lace sleeves and a chapel train. Nothing too flashy. I wanted to look like myself, just the best version. Around noon, my maid of honor Sarah poked her head into the bridal suite. Her face had this weird expression, like she just watched someone kick a puppy but wasn't sure how to stop it. "Hey, your cousin just arrived," she said carefully. "And?" I was stepping into my shoes, trying not to fall over. "She's wearing. Well, you should probably see for yourself." That cold finger of dread traced down my spine. I knew that tone. I'd heard it 100 times before, right before discovering that Marissa had somehow inserted herself into yet another moment that wasn't hers. I walked to the window that overlooked the entrance courtyard, and there she was. Marissa was wearing a white ball gown. Not cream, not ivory, not champagne. Pure, bright, bridal white. The skirt was absolutely enormous, layers and layers of tulle and silk that made her look like she was floating inside a cloud. The bodice was covered in crystals that caught the sunlight and threw rainbows across the stone pathway. She had a cathedral-length veil trailing behind her. She looked more like a bride than I did. My hands started shaking. Sarah grabbed my elbow. "I already told the coordinator," Sarah said quickly. "She's going to talk to her, ask her to change or leave." But I knew better. Aunt Linda was already there, fussing over Marissa's dress, arranging the train, taking photos. The coordinator, a lovely woman named Patricia who'd been nothing but professional all week, approached them. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I saw Patricia's gestures, the careful diplomacy in her posture. I saw Aunt Linda's face go red. I saw her start jabbing her finger toward Patricia. My mother appeared in the courtyard next. Mom said something to Aunt Linda. They'd been close their whole lives, but in that moment, I saw my mother's expression harden in a way I'd never seen before. She pointed at Marissa's dress. Aunt Linda shook her head violently. Marissa just stood there, hand on her hip, smiling. Sarah's phone buzzed. She looked at it, then at me. "Your mom says to stay up here. She's handling it." 15 minutes later, my mother came back upstairs. Her makeup was smudged to the corners of her eyes. She'd been crying. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart," she said, and I knew I'd lost before the battle had even started. "Linda says the dress cost $5,000 and Marissa has nothing else to wear. She's refusing to leave. She says if we make her leave, she'll make a scene that ruins the ceremony. So we're just letting her hijack my wedding?" My voice came out strangled. "We're not letting her do anything. Everyone will know she's being inappropriate. People will judge her, not you." But that wasn't true. Because when people looked back at my wedding photos, they'd see her. They'd remember the cousin in the big white dress. They'd tell the story for years. "Remember that wedding where the cousin wore white? How crazy was that?" James found me 10 minutes later, still staring out that window. He wrapped his arms around me from behind and kissed my temple. "I heard," he said quietly. "Want me to have my groomsmen throw her out? Because Marcus played college football and he's been looking for an excuse to be useful." I almost laughed. Almost. But the sound caught in my throat and came out more like a sob. "No. It's fine. It's her being her. Everyone knows what she's like." "It's not fine," James said, and I felt his jaw clench against my hair. "It's your day. Not hers. If we make a big deal out of it, that's what everyone will remember. Let's just ignore her. Get through the ceremony. She'll get bored when she realizes nobody's paying attention to her." I actually believed that. Even after 23 years of evidence to the contrary, some naive part of me still believed that Marissa would have limits, boundaries, some basic sense of decency. The ceremony itself was beautiful. My father cried walking me down the aisle. James's vows made half the guests reach for tissues. When we kissed, everyone applauded, and for those 35 minutes, I forgot Marissa existed. I didn't see her in her ridiculous dress, didn't notice her preening for the photographers, didn't register the way she'd positioned herself in the front row on the bride's side, a spot reserved for my grandmother, forcing my grandmother to sit 3 rows back. The reception was held in the estate's grand ballroom, all vaulted ceilings and crystal chandeliers. Our first dance was to an acoustic version of our favorite song. Dinner was a choice of filet mignon or wild salmon, plated beautifully. The toasts from our parents were heartfelt without being embarrassing. James's best man told appropriately funny stories that didn't cross any lines. Everything was perfect. And then I stood up to give my speech. I'd spent weeks writing it. I wanted to thank everyone for coming, for their support, for the love they'd shown us as a couple. I wanted to tell James, in front of everyone who mattered to us, exactly why I'd chosen to spend my life with him. I'd practiced it in the mirror, in the car, while cooking dinner. I knew it by heart. I took the microphone from the DJ, tapped it once to make sure it was on, and smiled at the room full of people I loved. Hi everyone. For those of you who don't know me yet, I'm the bride. Gentle laughter. I just want to start by saying thank you. Thank you for traveling, some of you from across the country, to be here with us today. Thank you to my parents, who taught me what a strong marriage looks like. Thank you to James's parents, who raised the most incredible man I've ever. Sorry. Marissa's voice rang out, cutting through mine like a knife through silk. I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I just have to share something. I can't hold it in anymore. She was walking toward me, hand extended for the microphone. She was smiling, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was triumphant. It was the same smile she'd given me when she'd convinced my high school boyfriend I cheated on him. The same smile from when she'd accidentally spilled red wine on my college graduation dress minutes before the ceremony. The room had gone quiet. Everyone was looking at her, then at me, then back at her. My fingers tightened around the microphone. Don't give it to her, a voice screamed in my head. Don't let her do this. But I did. Because what choice did I have? If I refused, there'd be a struggle. A scene. People would film it on their phones. It would be all anyone remembered. So I handed her the microphone and stepped back, feeling like I was watching myself from somewhere outside my body. Thank you, Marissa gushed, as if I'd graciously offered her the floor instead of having it stolen. I promise this will be quick, but I just have to share with everyone, I'm pregnant. With twins. The room erupted. Not with applause, exactly. More like shock rippling outward, expressing itself in gasps and exclamations and a few genuine squeals of excitement from people who loved Marissa and didn't know better. Aunt Linda immediately burst into tears, actual tears of joy, and started grabbing nearby guests to hug them, as if they'd personally impregnated her daughter. Marissa's hand moved to her stomach in that universal gesture of maternal pride. She wasn't showing yet. Of course she wasn't. But she played the part beautifully, looking down with this serene, glowing expression. I know, this is supposed to be about the happy couple, she said, in a tone that made it clear she didn't actually believe that anymore. But I've been bursting with this news, and when I saw everyone gathered here, all the people we love most in the world, I just thought, what better time to share? We're already celebrating love and new beginnings, and now we get to celebrate new life too. The photographers had turned their cameras toward her. The videographer, who was supposed to be filming my speech, my moment, had swung his camera around to capture Marissa's announcement. Guests were pulling out their phones. In the back of the room, I saw my grandmother's face, tight with anger, but her disapproval was drowned in the wave of attention flooding toward my cousin. My $80,000 wedding had become Marissa's pregnancy announcement party. James appeared at my elbow. His hand found mine and squeezed so hard it almost hurt. I could feel him shaking. Actually shaking with rage. His jaw was clenched so tight I worried about his teeth. I'm going to kill her, he whispered. Not loud enough for anyone else to hear over the commotion. I'm actually going to kill her. Something in my brain clicked. Maybe it was the shaking in James's hand. Maybe it was the sight of Aunt Linda crying theatrical tears while my own mother stood frozen by the head table, looking like she wanted to melt into the floor. Maybe it was 23 years of swallowed words and stolen moments finally reaching critical mass. I leaned close to James's ear. Wait. He looked at me like I'd lost my mind. For what? For her to start handing out ultrasound photos? Trust me, I said. And then I smiled. Really smiled. For the first time since Marissa had walked into that courtyard in her ridiculous dress, I felt something other than hurt or rage. I felt calm. Certain. Clear. Because I'd remembered something. Something Marissa had told me 3 months ago, before the engagement photos, before the final guest count, before everything. We'd been at a family dinner, Aunt Linda's birthday. Marissa had been unusually quiet all evening, picking at her food. I'd asked if she was okay. She pulled me aside into the kitchen and told me she was having trouble. She and her husband Derek had been trying for a baby for over 2 years. They'd done 3 rounds of IVF. All failed. The doctors had said her chances of natural conception were virtually zero due to severe endometriosis. She was devastated. She'd cried in my arms for 20 minutes. I'd held her. Comforted her. Promised not to tell anyone. Because despite everything, despite the years of sabotage and cruelty, she was still my cousin. Still family. And in that moment, her pain had been real. But if she'd been pregnant with twins, she would have told me then. She would have been celebrating, not grieving. Which meant one of two things: either she'd had a miraculous conception in the past 3 months, or she was lying. I was betting everything on lying. Marissa was still talking, one hand on her stomach, describing morning sickness and cravings and how she and Derek were going to have to move into a bigger house. She was in her element, glowing under the attention, feeding off the energy of the room. I waited until she started winding down, until the speech was clearly ending. Then I moved forward and gently took the microphone from her hand. "How wonderful," I said, my voice steady and clear. "Since we're sharing big news." Marissa's face began to change. The triumph slipped, just slightly. Her eyes narrowed. I looked out at the crowd, at all those faces turned toward me, and I smiled warmly. I'm so glad Marissa felt comfortable enough to share her exciting news here. It means a lot that we're all so close. In fact, it reminds me that I should probably mention James and I have been keeping our own secret. James's hand tightened on mine again, but differently this time. Questioning. I squeezed back. "Trust me. We didn't want to overshadow anyone else's joy," I continued, looking directly at Marissa. "But since Marissa has opened the door to baby talk, I suppose there's no better time. James and I are also expecting. We found out 2 weeks ago. We weren't going to announce it today, we wanted this day to be about the marriage, not what comes after. But now that the subject's been broached..." The room erupted again, but this time the energy was different. Confused. Excited for me, but also bewildered. 2 pregnancy announcements at one wedding? Multiple guests were looking between Marissa and me, trying to figure out what was happening. Marissa's face had gone from smug to horrified, but I wasn't done. "Actually," I said, my voice taking on a thoughtful tone, "it's funny you mentioned twins, Marissa. Because, and I wasn't going to get into details today, but since you've been so open, my doctor also said there's a possibility of multiples. It runs in my family, as you know. My grandmother was a twin. So was my mother's aunt. This was true. All of it technically true, or at least not disprovable in the moment. Of course, it's still very early," I continued. "Too early to know for sure. We haven't even had our first ultrasound yet. So we're not telling people it's definitely twins or anything like that. We're being cautious. Waiting for medical confirmation before we make any grand announcements." I let that sentence hang in the air. Marissa's face had gone absolutely white. She understood. She knew that I knew. And she knew what was coming next. "Marissa," I said sweetly, "when's your first ultrasound? Have you gotten confirmation about the twins yet? I'd love to compare notes about doctors and symptoms and everything. It'll be so fun going through this together." She opened her mouth. Closed it. Opened it again like a fish drowning in air. We're using a private practice. Very exclusive. They don't usually. "Oh, which practice?" My mother's voice cut in from the side of the room. She'd found her footing again, and her tone was sharp as a scalpel. "Linda was just telling me last month how worried you and Derek were about the fertility issues. 3 failed IVF rounds, wasn't it? But I'm sure she'd love to know which doctor finally helped you conceive. For other family members who might need help." Aunt Linda's joyful expression began to crack. "What? Marissa, you told me you weren't doing IVF anymore. You said..." "Mom, it's complicated," Marissa started, but her voice had lost all its confidence. "When did you find out?" I asked, still smiling, still holding the microphone. "About the pregnancy? Because I remember we had coffee 2 weeks ago and you didn't mention anything. In fact, you ordered a latte with extra espresso. I remember thinking it was odd, since you usually worry about caffeine, but I guess you didn't know yet?" I hadn't had coffee with her 2 weeks ago. We rarely spent time together voluntarily. But she couldn't contradict me without revealing other lies. Yes, I found out after that. Just a few days ago. Very recently." "So you haven't had an ultrasound yet," I said. Not a question. A statement. "No, but I took multiple tests and they were all positive, so, and the twins?" James's voice joined mine, calm but cold. "How do you know it's twins if you haven't had an ultrasound?" Silence. The room had gone absolutely silent. People were starting to realize what was happening. The cameras were still pointing at Marissa, but the energy had shifted from celebration to scrutiny. I have a feeling," Marissa said weakly. "Mother's intuition. Before you're even past the first trimester?" My mother again. She'd moved closer, and her face was terrible to look at. "Before you've seen a doctor?" Marissa, if you're actually pregnant, congratulations. But if you're lying at your cousin's wedding to steal attention. I'm not lying. Marissa's voice pitched up, desperate now. Why would I lie about being pregnant? That's insane. I don't know, I said softly. Why would you? Derek, Marissa's husband, had been sitting at a table near the back. He stood up, looking confused and pale. Marissa, what's going on? I thought we agreed we weren't going to talk about the fertility stuff publicly. We're not talking about fertility stuff, Marissa snapped. We're announcing our pregnancy. Our twins. Derek's face did something complicated. Twins? Marissa, you told me yesterday you got your period. You were upset about it. He stopped, looking around at all the faces watching him, and the realization hit him like a physical blow. Oh, no. You didn't. Aunt Linda made a sound like a wounded animal. Derek, what are you saying? I'm saying she's not pregnant, Derek said, and his voice cracked. She can't be. She got her period. She was crying about it. Unless. He looked at Marissa with something like horror. Unless you lied to me too? Marissa stood frozen in her white ball gown, no longer the radiant center of attention but a specimen under glass. Everyone was looking at her. The photographers had lowered their cameras. The videographer had stopped recording. The silence was suffocating. Marissa's voice came out as a whisper. I wanted. I just wanted. You wanted what? I asked. The microphone made my voice echo through the ballroom. To ruin my wedding? Mission accomplished. You wore white. You interrupted my speech. You lied about being pregnant. What else was on your list? Tears started streaming down Marissa's face, but they didn't generate sympathy this time. They looked like the tears of someone caught, cornered, exposed. You always get everything, she sobbed. Perfect grades, perfect boyfriend, perfect wedding. Everything always works out for you. Just once, I wanted people to look at me. To be happy for me. To care about my life. So you lied about having babies? Aunt Linda's voice was barely recognizable. You lied to everyone? To me? To Derek? I was going to tell you later it was a mistake, Marissa said desperately. Just a misunderstanding. But for one day, just one single day, I wanted to know what it felt like to have everyone excited for me. To have everyone care. By stealing someone else's day? My grandmother had made her way to the front of the room, and despite being 83 years old and barely 5 feet tall, she looked terrifying. By humiliating your cousin at her own wedding? By lying about the one thing women should never lie about? Derek was already walking toward the exit. He didn't run, didn't make a scene, just walked out with his shoulders hunched like he was carrying something impossibly heavy. Marissa called after him, started to follow, but Aunt Linda grabbed her arm. You stay here, Aunt Linda said, voice shaking. You stay here and you apologize. To everyone. Right now. But Marissa jerked her arm away and ran after Derek, her ridiculous white dress trailing behind her, no longer a bridal train but a flag of surrender. The door slammed behind her. The ballroom stayed silent for maybe 5 seconds. Then my maid of honor Sarah started clapping. Slowly at first, then faster. James's best man Marcus joined in. Then more people. Within 10 seconds, the entire room was applauding, and some people were standing. They were applauding me. Aunt Linda stood in the middle of the ballroom, tears streaming down her face, real tears this time, not performative joy but genuine shame and grief. My mother went to her, put an arm around her shoulders. They left the room together. I handed the microphone back to the DJ. He looked at me with wide eyes, like he couldn't believe what he'd just witnessed. Could we, maybe play something upbeat? I asked. I think we need to reset the energy in here. He nodded and fumbled with his equipment. A moment later, an up-tempo song filled the room. People started talking again, the spell broken, the story already forming in their minds. Not the story of the cousin who wore white, but the story of the bride who'd ended a liar's reign. James pulled me into his arms. You're terrifying, he whispered in my ear. I'm so attracted to you right now it's probably inappropriate. I laughed. Actually laughed. It felt like the first real breath I'd taken in hours. I wasn't pregnant, I said softly, just to him. Obviously. I just needed her to admit she wasn't either. I know. I figured that out about halfway through. But for a second there. He pulled back to look at my face. Would you have actually let her think you were pregnant? Let everyone think that? For as long as it took, I said. Yes. The rest of the reception was actually wonderful. People danced. They ate cake. They took photos in the gardens as the sun set and painted everything gold. Multiple guests came up to me throughout the night to quietly say they'd always known Marissa was trouble, that they were proud of me for standing up to her, that the wedding was beautiful. My grandmother cornered me near the end of the night while James was saying goodbye to some of his college friends. "That was cruel," she said. My heart sank. "Grandma, it was cruel, calculated, and absolutely brilliant." She smiled, and her eyes were bright. "Your mother spent your whole life teaching you to turn the other cheek. I'm glad you finally learned when to stop." "You're not mad?" "Mad? Sweetheart, I've been waiting 23 years for someone to put that girl in her place. I'm just sorry it had to be you who did it, on your wedding day of all days. But I'm also proud. You didn't let her take it from you. You took it back." She hugged me, smelling like lavender and peppermint, and I felt something unknot in my chest that I hadn't even realized was tight. The aftermath came in waves over the following weeks. Marissa and Derek separated 4 days after the wedding. According to Aunt Linda, who called my mother every night to process her feelings, which my mother then relayed to me, Derek had been questioning the marriage for months. The fake pregnancy announcement was the final straw. He said he couldn't trust someone who would lie that elaborately, that publicly, about something that sacred. Marissa moved back in with Aunt Linda. She deactivated all her social media accounts after people started commenting on her wedding behavior. Someone had filmed the entire confrontation and posted it online, where it got picked up by wedding shaming groups and revenge story compilations. She became a cautionary tale: don't be this wedding guest. Aunt Linda and my mother's relationship suffered. They still talked, but the easy intimacy was gone. Aunt Linda couldn't quite forgive my mother for not defending Marissa more aggressively. My mother couldn't quite forgive Aunt Linda for raising someone who would do what Marissa did. I felt guilty about that. Despite everything, I hadn't wanted to damage my mother's closest relationship. "Don't," my mother said when I tried to apologize. "Marissa made her choices. Linda enabled them. I love my sister, but I love you more, and I should have stopped this years ago. I should have protected you better. You always told me to be the bigger person. I was wrong. Sometimes being the bigger person just means letting bullies win." James and I didn't go on our honeymoon right away. We planned 2 weeks in Italy, but we pushed it back a month because we both felt like we needed time to decompress from the wedding chaos. When we finally did go, it was perfect. Actual, uncomplicated perfect. We ate pasta and drank wine and walked through ancient streets and didn't talk about Marissa once. But when we got back, there was a letter waiting in our mailbox. It was from Marissa. Handwritten. 6 pages long. I almost threw it away without reading it. James said I should. But curiosity won. The letter was part apology, part explanation, part justification. She admitted the pregnancy was a lie. She admitted the dress was intentional, she'd ordered it specifically because it was more dramatic than mine. She admitted she'd planned the announcement in advance, had been waiting for the perfect moment during my speech. But then she spent 4 pages explaining why. How I'd always been the favorite, the golden child, the one who succeeded effortlessly while she struggled. How she felt invisible her entire life, standing in my shadow. How every achievement I unlocked was a reminder of her failures. How the fertility issues had destroyed her sense of worth, and seeing me get married, to someone wonderful, in a beautiful venue, with everyone celebrating, had been unbearable. "I wanted you to feel what I felt," she wrote. "Just for one day. Just for one moment. I wanted you to know what it's like to have the thing you want most stolen right in front of you, while everyone watches and does nothing." The letter ended with an apology that didn't feel like an apology. "I'm sorry I hurt you. I'm sorry I ruined your day. But I'm not sorry you finally understand how I felt all these years. Maybe now we're even." I read it twice. Then I put it in a drawer and haven't looked at it since. Because here's the thing, we were never even. Not once in 23 years did I intentionally sabotage her. Not once did I scheme to steal her moments or diminish her achievements. I succeeded because I worked hard. I had good relationships because I treated people well. I had a beautiful wedding because I saved money and made choices that reflected my values. Marissa's misery was her own creation. Her jealousy, her cruelty, her inability to be happy for anyone else, those were choices she made every single day. And when those choices finally caught up to her, when she finally faced consequences for her actions, she still couldn't take responsibility. She still found a way to blame me. The truth is, I don't think about Marissa much anymore. Sometimes I see her at family events. She always sits far away from James and me, never makes eye contact, leaves early. Aunt Linda makes awkward small talk, always slightly apologetic, always slightly defensive. My mother hugs me a little tighter at these gatherings, as if to say, I've got you. James asked me once if I regretted it. If I wished I'd handled it differently, taken the high road, let Marissa have her moment without the confrontation. No, I said. I regret all the times before that I didn't stand up for myself. I regret believing that being kind meant being a doormat. I regret all the years I let her make me feel small. But that night? I don't regret that at all. Even though it created this whole mess with your family? She created the mess. I just refuse to clean it up this time. We have actual pregnancy news now. Found out last month. Just one baby, not twins. We haven't told most of the family yet, we're waiting until the second trimester, being cautious. We won't be making any grand announcements. We'll tell people privately, in conversations meant for sharing, not stealing. Because that's the difference, isn't it? Between sharing joy and weaponizing it. I think about my wedding day sometimes. Not the dress or the flowers or the venue, those details have faded into soft focus memory, but I remember standing in that ballroom, microphone in hand, looking at Marissa's smug face, and feeling something shift inside me. For years, I carried this belief that I was somehow responsible for her unhappiness. That if I just diminished myself enough, made myself smaller, less successful, less visible, maybe she'd finally be satisfied. Maybe she'd finally be happy. But that night, I understood, nothing would ever be enough. No amount of sacrifice, consideration, or self-diminishment would satisfy someone who'd built their entire identity around being a victim. Marissa didn't want me to succeed less. She wanted me not to exist at all, or to exist only as a mirror that reflected her superiority. And I was done being that mirror. People ask me sometimes if I think what I did was cruel. If I feel bad about humiliating her, about exposing her lies so publicly, about turning her moment of triumph into her worst nightmare. The answer is complicated. Do I feel bad that she experienced public humiliation? A little. I'm not a monster. But do I regret protecting my wedding, calling out her manipulation, refusing to be victimized one more time? Not even slightly. There's this idea that women, especially family members, should just absorb bad behavior gracefully. That we should prioritize peace over justice, unity over boundaries. That speaking up, fighting back, or defending ourselves is somehow more aggressive, more wrong, than the initial attack. But that's just another way of telling victims to shut up and take it. Marissa didn't just wear white to my wedding. She didn't just interrupt my speech. She orchestrated an elaborate lie designed to steal attention, manipulate emotions, and make my most important day about her manufactured crisis. She gambled that everyone would be too polite, too shocked, or too invested in keeping the peace to challenge her. She gambled wrong. And yes, the consequences were harsh. Public humiliation, a failed marriage, damaged family relationships, internet infamy. But those consequences came from her choices, not mine. I just refused to be complicit in the lie. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd handled it differently. If I'd let her have her moment, finished my speech after she'd finished hers, tried to reclaim the day through grace instead of confrontation. Maybe the evening would have been less dramatic. Maybe Aunt Linda would have eventually realized the truth on her own. Maybe Marissa would have confessed the lie privately, and we could have all moved forward without the spectacle. But probably not. Because Marissa had done this exact thing, in smaller ways, dozens of times before. And every single time, the family had smoothed it over, made excuses, let it go. We'd enabled her for so long that she'd stopped believing there would ever be consequences. Someone had to say, enough. I just wish it hadn't had to be me, on my wedding day, in front of 108 people. But maybe that's exactly when it needed to happen. Maybe the only way to end a pattern that destructive was to make the consequences as public and undeniable as the offense. Last week, my mother told me that Aunt Linda had asked about me. How I was doing, whether the pregnancy was going well, if I was happy. My mother said she'd answered honestly, yes, I was doing great. James and I were excited about the baby. We'd bought a house. Life was good. What did she say? I asked. She said she was glad. And then she said. My mother paused, choosing words carefully. She said she hopes someday you and Marissa can reconcile. That you were so close as kids, and it's sad to see family broken like this. I didn't say anything for a minute. We were never close, I finally said. That was just what the adults wanted to believe. My mother nodded slowly. I know. I think I've always known. I just didn't want to admit it. There's no neat ending to this story. No reconciliation scene where Marissa and I hug and promise to do better. No moment where Aunt Linda takes full accountability for enabling her daughter's behavior. No family dinner where everyone laughs about the crazy wedding drama and agrees to move forward. Marissa is still Marissa. Still jealous, still bitter, still convinced the world is unfair to her specifically. Aunt Linda is still defensive, still making excuses, still unable to see her daughter clearly. The family dynamics are still fractured, still careful, still carrying the weight of that night. But I'm okay with that. Because the alternative, continuing to sacrifice myself on the altar of keeping peace, wasn't working. It never worked. It just taught Marissa that she could keep taking, and I would keep giving, and everyone would keep pretending this was normal family behavior. James asks me sometimes if I'm angry at my parents for not protecting me better, for not stopping Marissa's behavior years ago. I'm not. Or at least, I've made peace with it. They did what they thought was right, taught me kindness, patience, forgiveness. Those aren't bad values. They're just incomplete. They forgot to also teach me boundaries, self-advocacy, and the difference between being kind and being a doormat. But I learned those lessons anyway. Just later than I should have. And more dramatically than anyone expected. Our baby is due in 5 months. We're not finding out the gender, we want to be surprised. The nursery is painted soft yellow, filled with books and stuffed animals and tiny clothes that don't seem real. James has already started talking to my belly, telling our future child ridiculous stories about his childhood and promising to teach them how to cook and how to change a tire and how to stand up for themselves. Especially that last part. Because if there's one thing I want our kid to learn early, it's that kindness doesn't mean weakness. That loving your family doesn't mean accepting abuse. That protecting yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. I want them to be good. But I also want them to be strong. And if someone ever tries to steal their moment, diminish their achievement, or manipulate their joy for personal gain, I want them to smile calmly, take back the microphone, and refuse to be anyone's victim. Just like their mother did. Sometimes, late at night, James will ask me if I ever regret it. Not the confrontation itself, but the fallout. The family damage, the ongoing awkwardness, the fact that half my relatives probably think I'm vindictive. Do you know what I regret? I tell him. I regret all the times I stayed quiet. Every achievement she sabotaged that I just accepted. Every cruel thing she said that I pretended not to hear. Every moment I made myself smaller to make her feel bigger. That's what I regret. And the wedding? The wedding was the first time in my entire life I refused to be smaller than I am. The first time I said, no, this is mine, and you can't have it. The first time I chose myself. How does that feel? I think about it. About the me who existed before that night, who would have handed over the microphone and swallowed the hurt and called it grace. About the me who exists now, who knows exactly where her boundaries are and what she will and won't accept. It feels like waking up, I say. Like I spent 23 years sleeping through my own life, and that night I finally opened my eyes. And it's true. Because before that night, some part of me still believed that if I was just good enough, kind enough, successful enough, maybe Marissa would finally see me as a person instead of a target. Maybe she'd realize we could both succeed, both be happy, both take up space in the world. But that night, I realized, she'll never see me that way. And spending my life trying to earn her approval or her peace was like trying to fill a bucket with no bottom. Pointless, exhausting, and ultimately self-destructive. So I stopped trying. I stopped managing her emotions. Stopped making myself smaller. Stopped sacrificing my joy to spare her jealousy. And yeah, it cost me something. Cost my family something. Created awkwardness and distance and uncomfortable silences at gatherings. But it also gave me something, myself. My voice. My refusal to be diminished. And that trait? That was worth it. I'd do it again in a heartbeat. The thing nobody tells you about standing up to a lifetime bully is that the aftermath doesn't feel like victory. Not immediately, anyway. It feels like standing in the wreckage of something that was already broken, finally seeing the damage clearly for the first time. 3 weeks after the wedding, I ran into Marissa's best friend, or former best friend, I should say, at the grocery store. Chelsea had been in Marissa's inner circle since high school, one of those friends who enabled every bad behavior because it made for good entertainment. She cornered me by the produce section, her cart blocking my path. "You really humiliated her, you know," Chelsea said, not bothering with pleasantries. "She's been having panic attacks. Can barely leave the house. But I guess you got what you wanted, right? Revenge? I looked at Chelsea for a long moment, at her self-righteous expression, and I felt something I hadn't expected: pity. Did Marissa tell you what she did before I said anything? I asked quietly. Did she mention interrupting my speech? Lying about being pregnant? Wearing a wedding dress to my wedding? Chelsea's jaw tightened. She was just trying to share her joy. She was lying, Chelsea. There was no pregnancy. There was no joy. There was manipulation, and theft, and a calculated attempt to ruin my wedding day. But sure, let's focus on how I made her feel bad by refusing to let her get away with it. You could have handled it privately. She made it public. I just didn't let her control the narrative. I moved my cart around hers. If Marissa's having panic attacks, maybe it's because she finally has to face consequences. That's not my fault. That's hers. I walked away before she could respond, my hands shaking slightly as I gripped the cart handle. Because here's what people like Chelsea never understand: they mistake silence for peace. They think that as long as nobody makes a scene, everything's fine. But everything wasn't fine. It hadn't been fine for 23 years. It had just been quiet. That night, I told James about the encounter. We were in bed, him reading some thriller novel, me scrolling mindlessly through my phone. Chelsea ambushed me at the store today, I said. Told me I'm destroying Marissa's mental health. James put his book down and looked at me. And I told her the truth. That Marissa destroyed her own mental health by lying and manipulating people for years. That I'm not responsible for her feelings. Good. He pulled me closer. You know what the problem is? People spent your whole life training you to manage Marissa's emotions. They made you responsible for her happiness, her self-esteem, her sense of worth. And now that you've stopped playing that role, they don't know what to do. He was right. I'd spent so many years being the emotional support system for someone who only ever took from me. The designated bigger person. The one who absorbed the hurt so everyone else could pretend the family was functional. Do you think I'm a bad person? I asked. For what I did? James was quiet for a moment, really considering the question instead of rushing to reassure me. I think you're a person who got tired of being treated badly, he finally said. I think you made a choice in a moment of crisis, and that choice had consequences. But those consequences started with Marissa's actions, not yours. You didn't create the situation. You just refused to be a victim in it. That's not really an answer. Okay, then here's your answer: no. You're not a bad person. You're actually a remarkably good person who finally learned she's allowed to defend herself. And I'm proud of you for that, even if it wasn't pretty, even if it made people uncomfortable. I kissed him then, grateful for his clarity, for his refusal to make me feel guilty about self-preservation. The pregnancy progressed. Morning sickness, exhaustion, weird food aversions that made no sense. James would make me ginger tea and rub my feet and tell me I was beautiful even when I felt like a bloated whale. We went to our first ultrasound together, saw that tiny flickering heartbeat on the screen, heard the whooshing sound that was supposedly our baby. We cried. Both of us. Sitting in that darkened room with the technician smiling at us, holding hands, understanding for the first time that this was real. We were bringing a person into the world. A whole entire human who would depend on us for everything. Are you scared? I asked James in the car afterward. Terrified, he admitted. But also excited. Is that weird? If it is, we're both weird. We decided to tell our families at a small dinner party. Just parents and siblings, nothing elaborate. My mother cried happy tears. James's parents immediately started talking about nursery furniture and offering to help paint. My younger brother, who'd been mostly silent during the wedding drama, hugged me tight and whispered, "You're going to be an amazing mom." Aunt Linda and Marissa weren't invited. We'd sent them a card in the mail, a simple announcement with no expectation of response. I didn't want another family event hijacked by Marissa's feelings, another moment stolen by her need for attention. My mother seemed relieved by this decision, though she tried to hide it. She and Aunt Linda were still talking, but the calls had become shorter, more careful. The easy intimacy of sisterhood had been replaced by polite updates and surface-level pleasantries. Do you think we'll ever get back to normal? My mother asked me one afternoon while we were shopping for baby clothes. I don't think there was ever a normal, I said honestly. There was just us pretending everything was fine while Marissa did whatever she wanted. That's not normal. That's dysfunction with a pleasant mask. She picked up a tiny onesie with elephants on it, studied it without really seeing it. I failed you, didn't I? By not protecting you better. By telling you to be the bigger person instead of teaching you to defend yourself. Mom, no, let me say this. She looked at me, and her eyes were wet. I spent so much time trying to keep the peace with my sister that I sacrificed your peace. I taught you to absorb cruelty because it was easier than confronting it. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I hugged her there in the middle of the baby store, both of us crying, other shoppers probably wondering what was wrong with us. You taught me to be kind, I said. That's not nothing. I just had to learn that kindness doesn't mean letting people hurt you. Your wedding shouldn't have been where you learned that lesson. Maybe not. But at least I learned it. We bought the elephant onesie. And about 15 other things we definitely didn't need yet, but couldn't resist. The baby kicked for the first time when I was alone in the house, folding laundry. Just a little flutter, like a butterfly trapped behind my ribs. I stopped moving, hand pressed to my stomach, waiting to feel it again. When I did, I started crying, not sad crying, just overwhelmed crying. Crying at the impossibility of it all, the magic and terror of growing a person inside my body. I called James immediately. He rushed home from work, pressed his hand to my belly, and waited. Nothing happened. Of course. The baby had impeccable comedic timing already. It'll happen, I assured him. Just keep your hand there. We stood like that for 10 minutes, his palm warm against my stomach, both of us holding our breath. And then, there. A tiny thump, like someone knocking from the inside. James's face transformed. Pure wonder, pure joy, pure terror, all at once. Hi, baby, he whispered to my stomach. It's your dad. I'm out here waiting for you. Take your time, but not too much time, because I really want to meet you. I thought about Marissa in that moment. About how desperately she'd wanted this, how much the fertility struggles had destroyed her. And I felt a pang of sympathy, not enough to forgive, not enough to forget, but enough to acknowledge that her pain had been real, even if her methods had been unforgivable. But then I remembered the smug look on her face when she'd grabbed my microphone. The triumphant gleam in her eyes when she'd announced her fake pregnancy. The calculated cruelty of wearing that dress, planning that speech, executing that theft. Sympathy evaporated. Because wanting something doesn't give you the right to destroy someone else to get it. Pain doesn't justify cruelty. And suffering doesn't earn you permission to make everyone around you suffer too. Marissa had choices. She chose manipulation over honesty. Performance over authenticity. Sabotage over support. And she chose wrong. We saw her again at my grandmother's 84th birthday party. We tried to avoid it, but my grandmother specifically requested we be there, and you don't say no to an 84-year-old woman who bakes you cookies and tells you stories about surviving the Great Depression. Marissa arrived late, slipping in through the back door like she was hoping nobody would notice. She'd lost weight, enough that she looked gaunt instead of thin. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she wore no makeup. The transformation from the polished, preening woman at my wedding was startling. She saw me immediately. Our eyes met across my grandmother's crowded living room. For a second, I thought she might leave. But instead, she took a deep breath and walked over. James's hand found mine, squeezed. Ready to defend me if necessary. Hi, Marissa said quietly. Her voice was smaller than I'd ever heard it. Hi. Awkward silence. People nearby were definitely watching, pretending not to but absolutely listening. She glanced at my visible baby bump, then away quickly. Congratulations. On the baby. Thank you. More silence. Painful silence. I'm sorry, she finally said, the words tumbling out quickly, like she'd practiced them but wasn't sure she'd have the courage to deliver. For what I did. At your wedding. She stopped, started again. There's no excuse. I was cruel and selfish and I ruined your day, and I'm sorry. I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation, performance, hidden agendas. But all I saw was exhaustion and genuine shame. Okay, I said. She blinked. Okay? I accept your apology. Thank you for saying it. That's it? I considered the question. What did she want? Absolution? Friendship? Permission to stop feeling guilty? That's it, I confirmed. I accept your apology. I appreciate you saying it. But I'm not interested in rebuilding a relationship. I'm not interested in pretending the past didn't happen. I'm just interested in moving forward with my life. Without you in it. Her face crumpled slightly, but she nodded. I understand. I hope you figure out whatever you need to figure out, I added, and I meant it. I hope you find a way to be happy that doesn't involve tearing other people down. I genuinely hope that for you. Thank you, she whispered, and then she turned and walked away. James exhaled slowly. That was surprisingly mature. I'm growing as a person, I said lightly, but my hands were shaking. My grandmother appeared at my elbow, seemingly out of nowhere despite being 84 and walking with a cane. I'm proud of you, she said simply. For what? For not letting her back in just because she apologized. Apologies are easy. Changed behavior is hard. Don't give her access to your life again until she proves she's done the hard work. You don't think I should forgive her? I think forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation. You can forgive someone and still keep them at a distance. You can wish them well and still protect yourself. Those things aren't contradictory, no matter what people tell you. She was right. And hearing it from her, someone who'd survived real hardship, real challenges, real betrayals, made it feel less selfish, less vindictive. The party continued. Cake was cut. Presents were opened. Marissa left early, as expected, slipping out the back door the same way she'd entered. Aunt Linda looked relieved when she left, which told me everything I needed to know about how things were going at home. My mother and Aunt Linda talked quietly in the corner for most of the party, their body language stiff and careful. They hugged goodbye at the end, but it was the kind of hug that feels obligatory rather than warm. Broken things trying to pretend they weren't broken. I felt sad about that. Genuinely sad. Not guilty, exactly, but sad that my standing up for myself had collateral damage. That protecting my peace had cost my mother hers, at least partially. But then I thought about what James had said. People spent my whole life training me to manage Marissa's emotions. Making me responsible for the family's harmony. Turning my boundaries into family betrayals. And I realized that was never fair. It was never right. And I was done carrying that weight. The baby was born on a Tuesday in April. 19 hours of labor, more pain than I thought humanly possible, and then suddenly, there she was. A daughter. 7 pounds, 6 ounces. Perfect tiny fingers, perfect tiny toes, perfect tiny face that somehow looked like both me and James at the same time. We named her Eleanor, after my grandmother. Eleanor Ruth. She was 3 days old when my mother brought Aunt Linda to the hospital. I'd said no visitors except immediate family, but apparently my mother had made an exception without asking me first. I was exhausted, bleeding, emotional, trying to figure out how to breastfeed, and absolutely not in the mood for family drama. Aunt Linda stood in the doorway holding a gift bag, looking nervous. I know you said no visitors, she started. But I wanted to meet her. And I wanted to say. She trailed off, struggling. I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. For Marissa. For enabling her. For not seeing what she was doing to you all those years. I looked at my mother, who had the grace to look slightly guilty for ambushing me. It's fine, I said, too tired to be angry. You can meet her. Aunt Linda approached the bed carefully, peering at Eleanor's sleeping face. And she started crying. Real tears, not performative ones. She's beautiful, Aunt Linda whispered. She's absolutely beautiful. Thank you. Marissa sends her congratulations. She wanted me to tell you that. I didn't respond to that. Just held my daughter closer, a protective instinct flaring. Aunt Linda seemed to understand. She didn't push. Didn't ask if Marissa could visit. Didn't suggest future playdates or family gatherings. Just admired Eleanor for a few minutes, left the gift bag, and hugged my mother goodbye. After they left, James looked at me. You okay? Yeah. Surprisingly, yeah. Because here's what I'd learned. I could accept Marissa's apology without giving her access to my life. I could acknowledge Aunt Linda's regret without absolving her of responsibility. I could maintain boundaries without being cruel. I could be kind without being a doormat. Strong without being heartless. Protective without being vindictive. I could be, in other words, exactly who I needed to be for myself and my daughter. Looking at Eleanor's perfect sleeping face, I made her a silent promise. I would teach her to be good. But I would also teach her to be strong. I would teach her kindness. But also boundaries. I would teach her forgiveness. But also self-preservation. I would teach her that loving your family doesn't mean accepting abuse. That protecting yourself isn't selfish. That sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no, and mean it, and not apologize for it. And if anyone ever tries to steal her moment, diminish her achievement, or manipulate her joy, I'll teach her exactly what her mother did. Smile calmly, take back the microphone, and refuse to be anyone's victim. Because that's what real strength looks like. Not in never being hurt, but in refusing to let that hurt define you. Not in never facing bullies, but in finally learning when to stop being the bigger person and start being the protected person. Not in perfect revenge, but in perfect boundaries. And as I sat there holding my daughter, exhausted and sore and more in love than I'd ever been in my life, I realized something. That night at my wedding, when I took back the microphone and exposed Marissa's lies, I wasn't just saving my wedding day. I was saving myself. And in doing so, I became exactly the mother my daughter deserved. Strong enough to protect her. Brave enough to model boundaries. Wise enough to teach her the difference between kindness and weakness. Would I do it all again, knowing the cost? The family fractures, the gossip, the judgment, the uncomfortable Thanksgivings? In a heartbeat. Because the alternative, teaching my daughter that women should stay quiet, absorb cruelty, prioritize everyone's comfort over their own dignity, was unthinkable. I'd rather be the cautionary tale of the bride who fought back than the sad story of the woman who let them take everything. And as Eleanor stirred in my arms, making tiny baby sounds, opening her eyes for just a moment before drifting back to sleep, I whispered to her, "You are so loved. So wanted. So worth protecting. And I promise you, nobody will ever make you feel small. Not on my watch." That's the real ending to this story. Not revenge. Not victory. Not even closure. Just a mother, holding her daughter, promising to break cycles instead of perpetuating them. Promising that this little girl would grow up knowing her worth, defending her boundaries, and refusing to be anyone's victim. Just like her mother finally learned to do.
Story 3.
"We're taking Grandma off life support tomorrow," my aunt declared. "I have power of attorney, and this is too expensive." What she didn't mention was that she had full access to Grandma's $600,000 estate and wasn't spending a dime of it. For 8 months, I'd been paying $15,000 monthly from my own savings for Grandma's care, while my aunt bought a new Porsche SUV and renovated her kitchen. I'd been silent, visiting Grandma every day while they never came. That night, I made one phone call. When my aunt walked into the hospital the next morning in her new designer outfit, 2 detectives were waiting by Grandma's door. "Ma'am, we need to discuss some unusual withdrawals. 8 months ago, my grandmother had a massive stroke. One minute she was weeding her garden, humming that old song she always sang when she was happy, and the next minute she was on the ground, half her body refusing to cooperate with what her brain was telling it to do. My uncle found her there, dirt still under her fingernails, her pruning shears lying in the grass beside her. They said she might not make it through the first night. She did, though. Because my grandmother, even at 78, was tougher than anyone gave her credit for. She'd survived the Depression as a child, raised 4 kids mostly on her own after my grandfather passed young, and built a successful catering business from her kitchen table. The woman knew how to fight. But fighting wasn't going to be enough this time. The doctors were blunt. She'd need full-time care, possibly for years. The stroke had damaged her brain in ways that meant she couldn't speak clearly, couldn't walk without assistance, couldn't manage her own basic needs. They used terms like significant cognitive impairment and long-term rehabilitation facility. What they meant was, your grandmother isn't coming home. That's when my Aunt Patricia swooped in. Patricia is my father's older sister, and she's always been the kind of person who shows up to family gatherings 45 minutes late with store-bought cookies she tries to pass off as homemade. She wears too much perfume, laughs too loud at her own jokes, and has a way of making every conversation somehow about her. But she's also sharp. Strategic. The kind of person who always has an angle. "Don't worry about anything," she announced to the family on day 3, standing in the hospital waiting room with her arms crossed, wearing a pantsuit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "I have financial power of attorney. Grandma set it up years ago, and I'll make sure everything is handled properly." Everyone nodded. Everyone seemed relieved, actually. Medical decisions, financial decisions, care decisions, it was overwhelming, and here was Patricia, taking charge like she always did. My father looked like a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. "That's good, Pat. Really good. I don't think I could handle all that paperwork right now." My Uncle Tom, the one who'd found her, just stared at the floor. "Whatever needs to be done. Just make sure Mom's comfortable." "Of course," Patricia said, and her smile was warm and reassuring. Family takes care of family. I was the only one who caught the quick glance she made toward her husband, Richard. The tiny nod he gave her back. At the time, I thought I was being paranoid. I wasn't. The first care facility Patricia chose was nice. Really nice, actually. Private room, good nursing staff, physical therapy 4 times a week. It was the kind of place that smelled like vanilla air freshener instead of disinfectant, where the walls were painted in warm colors instead of institutional beige. It was also expensive. $15,000 a month, not including medications and additional therapies. Grandma's estate will cover it, Patricia assured us at the family meeting she called 2 weeks after the stroke. We were gathered in her living room, which I noticed had been recently redecorated. New furniture. New curtains. She has the resources, and she deserves the best care possible. My father asked the question I was thinking. How much does she have, exactly? I mean, I know she did well with the business, but... Approximately $600,000, Patricia said smoothly. Between savings, investments, and the sale of the business 5 years ago. It sounds like a lot, but long-term care can drain funds quickly. We'll need to be strategic. $600,000. I watched my father's eyes widen. My uncle's too. None of us had known it was that much. Grandma had always been modest, frugal even. She clipped coupons and bought generic brands and acted like spending $20 on a restaurant meal was a wild extravagance. And she'd been sitting on over $500,000. The important thing, Patricia continued, is that we're all on the same page about her care. I'll handle the financial side, work with the facility, make sure all the bills are paid. You all just focus on visiting her, keeping her spirits up. It sounded perfect. It sounded responsible. It was a complete lie. The bills started arriving at my apartment 6 weeks later. I'm not entirely sure why they came to me instead of Patricia. Some clerical error at the facility, probably, or maybe they had my address listed as an emergency contact. But there they were, invoices for $15,000, marked overdue in red stamps. I called the facility's billing department, confused. Ms. Chen? The woman on the phone sounded harried. Yes, we've been trying to reach someone in the family. We haven't received payment for the last 2 months. We've called the number Ms. Patricia Morgan provided, but she hasn't returned our messages. My stomach dropped. There must be a mistake. My aunt has power of attorney. She's supposed to be handling all of this. I understand, but we still need payment. If we don't receive it within 10 days, we'll have no choice but to move your grandmother to a state-funded facility. State-funded? I knew what that meant. Shared rooms. Overworked staff. The kind of place where residents sit in wheelchairs in the hallway because there's nowhere else to put them. I tried calling Patricia. Her phone went straight to voicemail. I tried again the next day. Voicemail. I drove to her house on the 3rd day. She wasn't home, according to Richard, who answered the door in golf clothes and seemed annoyed that I'd interrupted his afternoon. She's busy, he said shortly. She'll call you back when she has time. It's about Grandma's care facility bill. They say it hasn't been paid in 2 months. He frowned. That doesn't sound right. Pat's been handling everything. Must be some kind of mix-up. Can you have her call me? It's urgent. Sure. He was already closing the door. I'll let her know. She never called. On day 8, with 48 hours until the facility's deadline, I made a decision I'm still not entirely sure was the right one, but it was the only one I could live with. I paid the bill myself. $30,000 wiped out of my savings account in a single electronic transfer. Money I'd been saving for years, planning to use as a down payment on a house. Money I'd earned working 60-hour weeks as a data analyst, skipping vacations, living in a studio apartment I'd long outgrown. Gone. But Grandma would stay in her facility. She'd keep her private room, her physical therapy, her dignity. I told myself it was temporary. That Patricia would pay me back once I explained the situation. That there had been some kind of administrative error and everything would be sorted out. I told myself a lot of things that turned out to be wrong. The facility administrator was apologetic when I showed up with proof of payment. We're so sorry for the confusion, Ms. Chen. We'll make sure to update our records. Thank you for resolving this so quickly. Can I ask you something? I said, hesitating. Do you know why Patricia Morgan hasn't been responding to your calls? She shifted uncomfortably. I really can't discuss other family members' communications. Please. I'm just trying to understand what happened. She glanced around, then lowered her voice. Between us? We've left over a dozen messages. We've sent emails, written letters. Her husband called once, about 6 weeks ago, and said she'd handle it, but then. Nothing. We were starting to think the family had decided to move your grandmother elsewhere. My hands were shaking when I left her office. Not from anger yet, I wasn't there yet. Just confusion. Deep, unsettling confusion. Why would Patricia ignore the facility? She promised to handle everything. She had access to Grandma's entire estate, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Paying a monthly bill should have been automatic, simple. Unless. No, I told myself. No, that's crazy. She wouldn't. But the thought had planted itself, and it grew. I started visiting Grandma every day after work. The facility was 20 minutes from my apartment, and I'd sit with her for an hour or two, reading her favorite mystery novels aloud, showing her photos on my phone, trying to interpret the sounds she made since clear words rarely came anymore. Sometimes she'd squeeze my hand when I said something she liked. Sometimes her eyes would focus on my face with such intensity I could almost see her old self in there, trapped behind the damage the stroke had done. "I'm taking care of everything," I told her one evening, holding her hand while the sun set outside her window. "You don't need to worry about anything. Just focus on getting stronger." She made a sound, something between a word and a sigh, and a single tear rolled down her cheek. I wiped it away, my throat tight. "I know. I miss you too." The nurses loved her. They told me she was a model patient, that she tried so hard during physical therapy, that she had the sweetest temperament even when she was clearly frustrated by her limitations. "Does she get many other visitors?" I asked one of the nurses, a kind woman named Marie who always took extra time with Grandma. Marie's expression shifted, became carefully neutral. "You're here the most, honey. Pretty much every day." "What about my aunt? Patricia Morgan? She has power of attorney." "I've never met her." Marie's voice was gentle but pointed. "I've worked here 4 months, on this floor, with your grandmother. I've never seen anyone else visit except you." 4 months. Patricia hadn't visited in 4 months. None of them had, I realized with a sick feeling. My father, my uncle, they'd been busy, they had lives and jobs and their own families. They called to ask how Grandma was doing, and I always said she was fine, stable, comfortable. They trusted Patricia was handling the financial side. Only I was showing up. Only I was sitting with her, holding her hand, letting her know she wasn't forgotten. And only I had paid $30,000 to keep her from being moved to a place that would break what was left of her spirit. The next month's bill came. This time, it arrived directly to Patricia's address, but the facility CC'd me for family awareness. Another $15,000. Due in 30 days. I emailed Patricia. I called. I texted. I drove to her house again, and this time I didn't accept "she's not home" as an answer. "I need to see her," I told Richard firmly. "This is about her mother's care, and it can't wait." "She's really busy, Richard." I looked him dead in the eye. I'd paid $30,000 of my own money 2 months ago because the care facility wasn't getting paid. Now another bill is due. I need to speak with Patricia. Now. Something flickered across his face. Surprise? Guilt? He opened the door wider. "She's in her office." Patricia's home office was new, I realized as Richard led me down a hallway I didn't remember from my last visit. The whole back of the house had been renovated. Hardwood floors, crown molding, a beautiful bay window that probably cost more than my car. Patricia was sitting at a sleek modern desk, typing on her laptop. She looked up when we entered, and for just a second, just a flash, I saw irritation cross her face before she rearranged it into a smile. "Jessie. What a surprise. Richard, you should have told me she was here." "We need to talk," I said, not bothering with pleasantries. "About Grandma's bills." Her smile tightened. "Of course. Sit down. Let me just finish this email. Now, Patricia." She closed her laptop slowly, deliberately. "I don't appreciate the tone, Jessica. I'm doing my best to manage a very complicated situation. The facility says you haven't paid them in months. I had to pay $30,000 of my own money to keep Grandma from being moved. That's not possible. I've been handling all the payments. Show me." She blinked. "Excuse me?" "Show me the payment records. You have power of attorney, you have access to her accounts. Show me where the money's been going." The silence stretched between us. Richard had backed toward the door, suddenly very interested in his phone. "That's private financial information," Patricia said finally. "I'm not required to show you anything. I'm not asking as some random person off the street. I'm asking as someone who just spent $30,000 on care you were supposed to be paying for. I'm asking as Grandma's granddaughter, who's been visiting her every single day while you haven't shown up once in 4 months. Her face flushed. I've been busy. Managing someone's entire estate is time-consuming. Then manage it. Pay the bills. That's literally the only thing you need to do. The financial situation is more complex than you understand. Explain it to me. I don't have to explain anything to you. Her voice had gone cold. I have legal authority here. Not you. Me. And I'm handling things the way I see fit. I stared at her, my heart pounding. What are you doing with her money, Patricia? That's none of your business. It absolutely is my business when I'm the one keeping her in a safe facility. She stood up, and I realized this conversation was over. At least, she thought it was. I appreciate your concern, Jessica. Really. But you're overstepping. I suggest you go home and let me do what I was entrusted to do. I didn't move. The next bill is $15,000. Due in 4 weeks. Are you going to pay it? I'll handle it. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting. She walked to the door, holding it open. An unmistakable dismissal. Thank you for visiting. I left, but not because she dismissed me. Because I needed to think. To plan. To figure out what she was really doing. The pieces were there, scattered like a puzzle I hadn't realized I was supposed to be solving. The renovations to her house. The new furniture. Richard mentioning offhand that they'd just gotten back from 2 weeks in Europe. Patricia's designer clothes, her expensive jewelry. And Grandma's unpaid bills. I went home and did something I probably should have thought of months earlier. I started researching power of attorney laws in our state. What I found made my blood run cold. Power of attorney, I learned, comes with significant responsibility. The person holding it is called a fiduciary, which means they have a legal obligation to act in the best interest of the person they're representing. They're supposed to keep detailed records. They're supposed to keep personal funds completely separate from the principal's funds. They're absolutely not supposed to use the money for themselves. But they often do. Financial abuse of elderly people by family members holding power of attorney is disturbingly common. And it's often difficult to detect until it's too late. I made a list of Patricia's recent purchases and improvements, everything I could remember or piece together. House renovation, probably $80,000 to $100,000 European vacation, $15,000 minimum new furniture, $20,000 she'd been driving a new Porsche SUV the last few times I'd seen her, $85,000. That was over $200,000 in the last 8 months, at minimum. On top of whatever their normal household expenses were. Richard was a real estate agent who, according to my father, had been having a slow year. Patricia hadn't worked since she married him 15 years ago. Where was all this money coming from? I knew. I didn't want to know, but I knew. The 4th month's bill came due. I paid it. Another $15,000, draining more of my savings. I was down to less than $20,000 left in my account, and panic was starting to set in. How long could I keep doing this? What happened when my money ran out? I tried calling my father, thinking maybe if I explained the situation, he could intervene. But he was dealing with his own crisis. His wife had just been diagnosed with a serious illness, and he was barely holding things together. I'm sure Pat's handling it, he said, distracted. She said she would, and Pat's always been responsible with money. Can we talk about this later? I really can't deal with more stress right now. My Uncle Tom had the same response. He was going through a difficult divorce and sounded exhausted just talking about it. Everyone was dealing with their own disasters. Everyone trusted Patricia. Everyone except me. Month 5. Month 6. Month 7. $15,000. $15,000. $15,000. My savings account was almost empty. I'd started putting expenses on credit cards. I'd stopped going out, stopped buying anything that wasn't absolutely essential. I ate pasta and canned soup and rationed my heating to keep my electric bill down. And I visited Grandma every single day. You're losing weight, Marie said one evening, concern in her voice. Honey, are you okay? I'm fine, I lied. Just stressed at work. She studied me for a long moment, then lowered her voice. The administrator mentioned you'd been paying the bills directly. That's not your responsibility. Your grandmother has an estate. I know. Then why? Because no one else is doing it, I said quietly. And she deserves better than a state facility. Marie squeezed my shoulder. You're a good granddaughter. But you can't keep this up forever. I know that too. But I didn't know how to stop. Every time I thought about letting the payments lapse, I'd sit with Grandma and watch her work so hard in physical therapy, trying to relearn how to hold a spoon, how to form words. She was still fighting. How could I give up? The breaking point came in month 8. Patricia called a family meeting. Her tone on the phone was somber, authoritative. We need to discuss Mom's situation, she told my father, who conference called me and Tom in. It's been 8 months, and she's not showing significant improvement. The costs are mounting. We need to make some hard decisions. My stomach dropped. What kind of decisions? She's not getting better, Jessie. You've seen her. The doctors say this is likely as good as it's going to get. At some point, we have to be realistic about quality of life versus the financial burden. She's in physical therapy, I said sharply. She's working hard. She's making progress. Minimal progress, Patricia corrected. And it's costing, she paused. It's costing the estate significantly. At this rate, she'll burn through her savings in another 2 or 3 years, and then what? Then we figure it out, Tom said. She's our mother, Pat. I know she is. And I love her. But I also have a responsibility to be practical. There are other options. Less expensive facilities where she could receive adequate care. You mean state-funded places? I said flatly. I mean facilities that provide appropriate care at a more sustainable cost. My father sounded torn. I don't know, Pat. Those places. I've heard stories. There are good ones if you research properly. And frankly, she wouldn't know the difference at this point. Her cognitive function is too impaired. That was when I felt it. The shift from anxiety and confusion into pure, cold rage. She'd know, I said, my voice shaking. She absolutely would know. She recognizes people. She responds to conversation. She's still in there, Patricia, and she deserves to be treated like a human being, not a line item you're trying to cut from a budget. I'm trying to be responsible. Where's the money going? I interrupted. Silence on the line. The $600,000, I continued. Grandma's estate. You said you're managing it. You said you're paying her bills. So where's the money going? I don't have to justify my financial management to you. You're about to move her to a horrible facility to save money. Yeah, Patricia, you actually do have to justify it. To all of us. This is ridiculous. Show us the account statements, Tom said suddenly. Actually, yeah. Show us where the money's been going for the last 8 months. If the estate is running low, we should all see why. More silence. Then, those records are with my attorney. I'll have them sent over. She never sent them. 3 days later, she called another meeting. This one was just with my father and uncle. I wasn't invited, but my father told me about it afterward. Patricia had presented a plan to move Grandma to a state facility within 2 weeks. She'd already found one, she said. Already done the paperwork. All she needed was their agreement. She says it's necessary to preserve what's left of the estate, my father told me, sounding miserable. She showed us some numbers. Tom and I don't really understand all the financial stuff, but it seemed like the money's going faster than expected. Did you see actual bank statements? She showed us something on her laptop. Spreadsheets, I think? I don't know, Jessie. She's the one who's been dealing with all this. Dad. I took a breath. I need to tell you something. I've been paying Grandma's facility bills for the last 8 months. Silence. What? The facility wasn't getting paid. They were going to move her to a state facility 8 months ago, so I've been paying the bills myself. $15,000 a month. Out of my savings? That's not possible. Patricia said. Patricia lied. I've paid $120,000, Dad. My entire savings is gone. I'm in credit card debt. And Patricia hasn't paid a single bill or visited Grandma once. I could hear him trying to process this, trying to reconcile what I was saying with what Patricia had told him. She must not have known, he said finally. Maybe the facility was sending the bills to the wrong person. She knew. I told her. Twice. She said she was handling it. Then where's Mom's money? That, I said quietly, is the question. That night, I made a decision. I was done being polite. Done trusting the system to work itself out. Done waiting for Patricia to suddenly develop a conscience. I called a lawyer. His name was David Chen, no relation, despite the shared last name, and he specialized in elder law and estate cases. He listened to my story without interrupting, occasionally making notes. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. "This is financial exploitation," he said finally. "Textbook case. If what you're telling me is accurate, your aunt has violated her fiduciary duty in multiple ways. She's also possibly guilty of theft, fraud, and financial abuse of a vulnerable adult. Can we prove it? We'll need documentation. Bank statements from your grandmother's accounts, records of what Patricia's spent, proof that she had knowledge of the unpaid bills. The more evidence we can gather, the stronger the case." "How do we get access to Grandma's bank statements if Patricia controls everything?" "We file for an emergency hearing to have her power of attorney revoked and a temporary guardian appointed. Given what you've described, a judge will likely grant it." "How long will that take? If we file tomorrow? We could have a hearing within a week." "But Jessica, I need to warn you, this is going to get ugly. When you accuse someone of this kind of thing, especially family, they don't go quietly." "I don't care," I said. And I meant it. "She's planning to move my grandmother to a terrible facility in 2 weeks to cover up what she's done. I can't let that happen." "Okay." He sounded almost approving. "Let's get started." We filed the petition the next morning. Emergency hearing to review Patricia Morgan's execution of her power of attorney duties, with request for immediate suspension of her authority pending investigation. The court date was set for 6 days later. Patricia found out within 24 hours. She called me, and I'd never heard her sound like that before, voice tight with fury, words clipped and sharp. "You have no idea what you've just done." "I know exactly what I've done. I'm stopping you from stealing from Grandma and covering it up by warehousing her in a state facility. You stupid, naive little girl. You think you understand what's happening here? You think you can waltz into court and make accusations? They're not accusations if they're true. You haven't paid a single bill. You haven't visited her once. And you've somehow blown through over $200,000 in 8 months while living like you won the lottery. So yeah, Patricia, I understand exactly what's happening here. I'll destroy you for this. I'll make sure everyone in this family knows what a vindictive, lying, save it for the judge," I said, and hung up. My hands were shaking. My whole body was shaking. I'd never confronted anyone like that before, never gone to war with a family member. But I also felt something else. Relief. The days leading up to the court hearing were some of the worst of my life. Patricia launched a campaign to discredit me. She called my father, my uncle, distant cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. She painted me as jealous, vindictive, someone who'd always resented her success. She claimed I was trying to get control of Grandma's money for myself. "She's been poisoning Mom against the family," Patricia told my father, her voice dripping with false concern. "Going there every day, feeding her lies. Now she's making these wild accusations because I wouldn't just hand over control to her." My father called me, confused and hurt. "Jessie, what's really going on here? Pat says you've been trying to turn Mom against everyone." "Dad, I've been paying Grandma's bills because Patricia wasn't. That's all this is. I have proof." "But why would Pat do that? She loved Mom. She was excited to help manage everything." "I don't know why she did it," I said, exhausted. "But I know she did. And I can prove it in court." The doubt in his voice killed me. After everything, he still wasn't sure who to believe. My Uncle Tom was more supportive, but even he seemed uncertain. "Look, I believe you're trying to do the right thing. But are you sure you have all the facts? Maybe there's an explanation we're not seeing." I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake them both and make them understand. But all I could do was repeat the same things: unpaid bills, my depleted savings, Patricia's expensive purchases. And wait for the court date. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at my ceiling, running through everything in my mind. What if I'd missed something? What if Patricia had somehow covered her tracks better than I thought? What if the judge didn't believe me? At 3 a.m, I got up and drove to the facility. I used my keycard to get in, they'd given me one months ago since I visited so often, and went to Grandma's room. She was sleeping, her breathing steady, the machines around her humming quietly. I sat in the chair beside her bed and just watched her. This woman who'd worked her whole life, who'd built something from nothing, who'd saved carefully and lived modestly so she'd have security in her old age. And her own daughter had stolen it all. "I'm going to fix this," I whispered. "I promise." Her eyes opened, just slightly. She couldn't have understood my words, not really, but she looked at me. Really looked at me. And I knew I was doing the right thing. The courthouse was downtown, an imposing building with marble floors and high ceilings that made every footstep echo. David Chen met me outside, carrying a briefcase that I knew contained all our evidence. "You ready?" he asked. I wasn't. But I nodded anyway. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, less dramatic. Just wood paneling, fluorescent lights, and a handful of people scattered in the gallery. My father and uncle sat in the back row. They'd both taken off work to be here, though I wasn't sure if they were supporting me or just wanted to see what happened. Patricia arrived 15 minutes late, and I understood why immediately. She dressed carefully for this conservative suit, minimal jewelry, her hair pulled back in a simple style. She looked responsible, mature, trustworthy. Nothing like the woman who'd been living large on stolen money. Her lawyer was exactly what I'd expected: polished, expensive, confident. The kind of person who made you feel outmatched just by walking into the room. David leaned over and whispered, "Don't let them intimidate you. We have the facts on our side." The judge entered, and we all stood. She was in her 60s, with sharp eyes and an expression that suggested she'd seen every trick in the book and wasn't impressed by any of them. The hearing began with Patricia's lawyer painting me as exactly what Patricia had claimed: a disgruntled family member with no legal standing, making wild accusations to gain control of an estate I had no right to. "Your Honor, Ms. Chen has no power of attorney, no legal guardianship, no authority whatsoever in this matter. She's attempting to use the court system to settle what is essentially a family disagreement. My client has managed her mother's affairs responsibly and within the bounds of her legal authority." I sat there listening to the lies, my hands clenched in my lap so hard my nails cut into my palms. Then it was David's turn. "Your Honor, this is not a family disagreement. This is a case of financial exploitation and neglect. Ms. Patricia Morgan accepted the responsibility of power of attorney, which comes with specific legal duties she has violated in multiple ways." He laid it out systematically. The unpaid bills. The facility's attempts to contact Patricia. My payment records. The emails I'd sent that went unanswered. Patricia's refusal to show financial records when confronted. Ms. Chen paid $120,000 of her own money over 8 months to prevent her grandmother from being moved to a substandard facility. Meanwhile, Ms. Morgan made no payments to the facility and, according to our investigation, made significant personal purchases during the same period. Patricia's lawyer objected. "Your Honor, we have no evidence that those purchases were made with estate funds. Ms. Morgan and her husband have their own income." "We'll get to that," David interrupted smoothly. "But first, let's address the unpaid bills." He called the facility administrator as a witness. She testified about the months of unpaid invoices, the messages left for Patricia that went unreturned, the eventual decision to contact me as an alternative family contact. "Did Ms. Morgan ever explain why the bills weren't being paid?" David asked. "No. We never spoke with her directly. Her husband called once and said she would handle it, but then we heard nothing further." "And without Ms. Chen's intervention, what would have happened?" The administrator looked uncomfortable. "We would have been forced to discharge the patient. We can't provide care indefinitely without payment." "And where would Mrs. Morgan have gone?" "Most likely a state-funded facility that accepts Medicaid." The difference between those facilities and Grandview was left unsaid, but everyone in the room understood it. Patricia's lawyer tried to recover during cross-examination. "Isn't it possible there was simply a billing error? That the invoices were being sent to the wrong address?" "We sent bills to the address Ms. Morgan provided, and we also called and emailed. We attempted contact through multiple channels." "But mistakes happen in billing departments? For 8 consecutive months?" The administrator's voice was gentle but firm. "That's not a mistake, ma'am. That's non-payment." David then presented my bank statements. Every transfer, highlighted and annotated. $15,000, again and again and again, draining my account month by month. Ms. Chen is a data analyst making approximately $60,000 per year. She has no trust fund, no inheritance, no secondary income. This is money she saved through years of careful budgeting. And she spent it all to protect her grandmother. He showed the judge my current account balance, $3,000. My credit card statements showing mounting debt. This is what happened to someone who did the right thing, who stepped up when the person legally obligated to act failed to do so. I saw my father shift in his seat, saw his expression change. He was finally understanding. Patricia's lawyer fought back hard. She argued that I was irresponsible for paying bills I had no obligation to pay, that I should have gone through proper legal channels sooner, that none of this proved Patricia had done anything wrong. Where are the records showing misuse of estate funds? Where's the proof that Ms. Morgan spent her mother's money inappropriately? All we have is speculation and circumstantial evidence from a family member with clear bias. David smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. Your Honor, we're not asking you to make a final determination on the misuse of funds today. We're simply asking that you suspend Ms. Morgan's power of attorney temporarily and grant Ms. Chen access to the estate accounts so we can conduct a proper investigation. If Ms. Morgan has nothing to hide, this should be a simple matter of opening the books and showing that everything was handled properly. The judge looked at Patricia. Ms. Morgan, do you have the estate account records with you today? Patricia hesitated, and in that hesitation, I saw everything fall apart for her. Not with me, Your Honor. They're with my accountant. You've had a week's notice of this hearing. Your attorney surely advised you to bring any relevant financial documents. Yes, but I didn't think. Do you have records showing payments made to Grandview Care Facility from your mother's estate? Another hesitation. The records are being compiled. That's a yes or no question, Ms. Morgan. My accountant has them. So no. You don't have them here today. The judge's voice had gone cold. You've had 8 months to manage this estate, a week to prepare for this hearing, and you can't produce basic payment records? Patricia's lawyer jumped in. Your Honor, with respect, the estate's finances are complex. I don't care how complex they are. This court is being asked to review whether Ms. Morgan is fulfilling her fiduciary duty, and she arrives without the most basic documentation. That alone raises serious concerns. The judge looked down at the papers in front of her, and I held my breath. I'm granting the emergency petition. Patricia Morgan's power of attorney is suspended immediately, pending a full investigation. I'm appointing Jessica Chen as temporary guardian and conservator, with full access to estate accounts for review. Ms. Morgan, you are to cooperate fully with this investigation. You will provide all estate records, all account information, all documentation of expenses. You will do this within 72 hours. Do you understand? Patricia's face went white, then red. Your Honor, this is my mother. Your mother who you apparently haven't paid bills for in 8 months. Your mother who would have been moved to a state facility if not for your niece's intervention. Your mother whose financial records you can't produce. The judge's voice was sharp. You should have thought about these consequences before you accepted the responsibility of power of attorney. But I can explain. You'll have the opportunity to explain everything in 30 days when we reconvene. Until then, Ms. Chen is in charge. We're adjourned. The gavel came down, and it was over. Patricia started to argue, but her lawyer put a hand on her arm, silencing her with a sharp look. They huddled together, whispering urgently, while Patricia kept glancing at me with an expression of pure fury. David was packing up his briefcase, looking satisfied. That went well. She didn't have the records, I said, still processing. She came to court without any of the records. Because she can't produce them. Or because producing them would show exactly what she's been doing. He looked at me seriously. Jessica, I need you to be prepared. When we access those accounts, we're probably going to find something bad. People don't act the way she's acting unless they have something significant to hide. I nodded, but I still wasn't ready for what we'd find. My father caught up with me in the hallway outside the courtroom. His face was pale, and he looked older than I'd ever seen him. Jessie, I'm sorry. I should have believed you right away. I just couldn't imagine that Pat would. That she'd do something like this. It's okay, Dad. It's not okay. You've been dealing with this alone for months, and I didn't support you. His voice cracked. You spent all your savings, and I didn't even know. I hugged him, and he held on tight. We're going to fix this, I said. We're going to make sure Grandma's taken care of. Tom joined us, looking shell-shocked. I can't believe she didn't have any records. What kind of person takes on power of attorney and doesn't keep records? The kind who's stealing, David said, joining our conversation. I've seen it before. They think they'll never get caught, so they stop being careful. They get sloppy. How much do you think she took? Tom asked. We'll know in a few days. But based on her behavior? Enough that she's scared. Patricia walked past us then, her lawyer beside her, both of them moving quickly toward the exit. She didn't look at us. Didn't acknowledge our presence at all. But I saw her hands shaking. And I knew David was right. We were about to uncover something much worse than I'd imagined. The next day, accompanied by David Chen, an investigator he'd hired, I went to the bank where Grandma's main accounts were held. What we found was worse than I'd imagined. The accounts that should have held $600,000 held less than $90,000. Over $500,000, gone in 8 months. The investigator started going through the transaction records, and a pattern emerged quickly. Regular transfers to Patricia's personal accounts. Payments to contractors for her home renovation. Credit card payments for purchases ranging from furniture to jewelry to vacation bookings. She'd been treating Grandma's money like her own personal checking account. "This is criminal," David said quietly, looking at the statement spread across the conference table the bank had provided. "This isn't just civil liability. This is theft on a massive scale." I couldn't speak. I just stared at the numbers, thinking about my own depleted savings, about the nights I'd lain awake wondering how I'd pay next month's bill, about eating pasta for dinner for the 100th time while Patricia had been buying designer handbags with stolen money. "What do we do now?" I asked finally. "We report it. To the police, to Adult Protective Services, to the district attorney's office. And we sue her in civil court to recover whatever we can. She spent most of it." "I know. But her house has equity. So does her husband's business. We'll go after everything we can." I thought about my father, my uncle. About how this would tear the family apart. Then I thought about Grandma, working so hard in physical therapy, trusting that someone was taking care of her. "Do it," I said. "All of it?" The police investigation moved faster than I expected. Turns out, financial exploitation of the elderly is taken pretty seriously when you have clear documentation. The detective assigned to the case, a woman named Sarah Rodriguez, was thorough and surprisingly kind. "I see cases like this more often than you'd think," she told me during one of our meetings. Family members who think they're entitled to the money, who rationalize it as early inheritance or convince themselves the elderly person won't notice. But it's still theft. Still abuse. Will she go to jail? If we can prove intent? Absolutely. The amounts involved here, the clear pattern of deception, this is serious fraud. Patricia's life unraveled quickly after that. The investigation became public record. Word spread through the family. My father was devastated. My uncle was furious. Richard filed for divorce within 2 weeks, claiming he'd had no idea what Patricia was doing, though the investigation would later prove he'd known and benefited from it. Patricia's friends started distancing themselves. Her social media went dark. She stopped leaving her house except to meet with lawyers. And through it all, I kept visiting Grandma. I told her what was happening, even though I wasn't sure how much she understood. But I wanted her to know. Wanted her to know that someone had fought for her. One evening, about 3 weeks after the court hearing, something remarkable happened. I was reading to her, some cozy mystery novel she'd always loved, when she reached out and grabbed my hand. Not the weak squeeze she sometimes managed, but a real grip. Strong. "Jess, Z." The word was slurred but unmistakable. I nearly dropped the book. "Grandma?" "Good. Girl." Her eyes were focused, present, more like her old self than I'd seen since the stroke. "Thank you." I started crying. Just completely broke down, sobbing while holding her hand. "I'm so sorry," I said through the tears. "I'm sorry I didn't figure it out faster. I'm sorry she did this to you." Grandma made a sound, something that might have been shh, or might have been something else. But her hand stayed firm in mine, and her eyes said what her voice couldn't quite manage. She knew. She understood. And she was grateful. The district attorney filed charges 6 weeks after the investigation began. 3 counts of felony theft, 2 counts of exploitation of an at-risk adult, 1 count of fraud. Patricia was arrested at her home early on a Tuesday morning. I wasn't there for that. But I was at the hospital the next morning when she showed up. I'd gotten a call from the facility at 6:30 a.m. Patricia had somehow made bail and was on her way there, claiming she needed to see her mother and set things straight. "We're not supposed to restrict family visits," the administrator said nervously, "but given the circumstances, we wanted to alert you." I was there in 15 minutes, still in my pajamas under a hastily thrown-on coat. Patricia arrived 20 minutes later, and she looked terrible. Her designer clothes were wrinkled. Her hair was messy. Her makeup was smudged like she'd been crying. She also looked angry. "You can't keep me from seeing her," she said when she saw me standing in the hallway outside Grandma's room. "She's my mother." "The mother you stole $500,000 from?" I didn't steal anything. That money was for her care, the care I paid for. Out of my own pocket. While you bought a Porsche. Two detectives appeared at the end of the hallway. Detective Rodriguez and her partner, a tall man named Williams. They must have been alerted when Patricia made bail. Ms. Morgan, Rodriguez said, approaching calmly. We need you to come with us. You're violating the restraining order. What restraining order? The one the judge issued yesterday. You're not allowed within 500 feet of your mother or any of her financial accounts. Patricia's face went from white to red. This is insane. She's my mother. I have a right. You lost those rights when you stole from her, I said quietly. She turned on me then, and I saw something in her face I'd never seen before. Pure hatred. You smug little witch, she hissed. You think you're so righteous? You think this makes you the hero? You've destroyed this family. Destroyed me. For what? For money that was never yours? It wasn't yours either, I said. It was hers. And she needed it for her care, which you were supposed to provide. I was going to pay it back, with what? You spent it all. Detective Rodriguez stepped between us. Ms. Morgan, let's go. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. They escorted her out. She was crying now, mascara running down her face, her expensive heels clicking against the linoleum floor. I watched her go and felt nothing. Not triumph, not satisfaction. Just tired. Marie appeared beside me. You okay, honey? Yeah, I said. I'm okay. The trial was 8 months later. Patricia's lawyer tried to argue that she'd been overwhelmed by the responsibility, that she'd made mistakes but not criminal ones, that the family should handle this privately rather than through the courts. The prosecutor presented the bank records, the transfers. The timeline of my payments contrasted with Patricia's purchases, the unpaid bills and the expensive renovations. It took the jury 4 hours to convict on all counts. Patricia was sentenced to 6 years in prison and ordered to pay full restitution, which meant everything she and Richard had would be liquidated to recover what they could for Grandma's estate. It wasn't enough. They recovered maybe $200,000 of the $500,000 she'd stolen. But it was something. And more importantly, it was justice. Grandma stayed at Grandview Care Facility. The recovered funds, combined with what was left of her original estate, were enough to keep her there for several more years. She improved, slowly but steadily. She never fully recovered her speech or her mobility, but she got stronger. More present. More herself. I visited her 3 times a week now instead of every day. I had to set some boundaries for my own mental health, and she understood. My father and uncle visited regularly too, finally, guilt and awareness having jolted them into action. We celebrated her 80th birthday at the facility. They decorated her room with balloons, and the staff made a special cake. She smiled, really smiled, and managed to blow out 2 of the candles before she got too tired. Love. You, she told me that day, the words clearer than they'd been in months. I love you too, Grandma. She squeezed my hand, and her eyes were bright, sharp, aware. She knew what I'd done. What it had cost me. What I'd been willing to sacrifice to protect her. I never fully recovered my savings. The civil suit against Patricia and Richard eventually paid back about $60,000, a fraction of what I'd spent, but better than nothing. I'm still paying off credit card debt. Still living in my small apartment. Still working overtime to rebuild what I lost. But I'd do it again. Because here's what I learned: justice isn't clean. It's not simple. It doesn't fix everything or make everyone whole. But sometimes, it's enough to look someone in the eye, whether it's your grandmother in her hospital bed or your aunt in her designer clothes, and know that you did the right thing, even when it was hard. Even when it cost you everything. Patricia gets out of prison in 4 years, assuming good behavior. Grandma will be 84 then. I hope she's still here to see it. To know that the person who tried to abandon her, to discard her like she was worthless, didn't get the last word. I did. And sometimes, late at night when I'm lying in bed thinking about everything that happened, I think about that morning at the hospital. Patricia walking in wearing her expensive clothes, expecting to control the narrative one more time. And instead, finding detectives waiting. Finding consequences. Finding out that someone had been paying attention all along. Yeah, I'd do it all again. Every single part of it.
Story 4.
My brother called. We're staying at your place this weekend while you're gone. We'll take care of everything. When I returned, my late mother's engagement ring, worth $240,000, was gone. I called my sister-in-law. She laughed. Oh, that? I pawned it. We needed $30,000 for our kitchen remodel. You'll get it back when we can afford it. Eventually. My brother added, stop being dramatic. You're insured, right? I said quietly, you're right. I do have insurance. I also have the security camera footage, the police report I filed this morning, and 3 weeks ago, I got a call from my brother Derek while I was packing for a work conference in Seattle. I'm a pharmaceutical sales rep, been doing it for 8 years, and this conference was mandatory. 3 days, late October, lousy timing because I just adopted a cat named Pepper 2 months earlier and hadn't found a reliable pet sitter yet. Hey, Natalie, Derek said, using that overly cheerful voice he deploys when he wants something. So, Jessica and I were thinking. Thinking what? I wedged my phone between my shoulder and ear, folding a blazer. We could stay at your place this weekend while you're gone. Watch Pepper for you. We'll take care of everything. I paused. Derek and I aren't close. We used to be, back when we were kids building forts in the basement and stealing cookies before dinner. But something shifted after he married Jessica 4 years ago. She had this way of isolating him, slowly and methodically, until family dinners became awkward and phone calls grew sparse. Still, he was offering to help, and I needed help. You'd really do that? I asked. Pepper needs her medication twice a day. It's kind of a whole thing. We've got it covered, he interrupted. Jessica loves cats. It'll be fun. Like old times. Old times. The phrase stuck in my throat like a fishbone, but I swallowed it down. Okay, I said. Yeah. That would actually be amazing. Thank you. No problem, sis. Family helps family, right? Right. I left detailed instructions on the counter, feeding schedule, medication doses, emergency vet numbers. I showed them where everything was, gave them the alarm code, handed over my spare key. Derek hugged me goodbye, actually hugged me, which he hadn't done since Mom's funeral, and said, have a great trip. Don't worry about anything. The conference was exhausting but productive. I barely thought about home except to text Derek twice asking how Pepper was doing. Both times he responded with a photo of her sleeping and a thumbs-up emoji. I flew back Sunday evening, dragged my suitcase through the apartment door around 9 p.m., and immediately knew something was wrong. The air felt different. Not bad exactly, just disturbed, like someone had rearranged the molecules. Pepper greeted me with anxious meowing, weaving between my legs frantically. The litter box hadn't been changed in days, I could smell it from the entryway. Derek? I called out, though I knew he was gone. His rental car wasn't in the lot. I walked through the apartment slowly, my pulse beginning to quicken. Kitchen looked fine. Living room seemed normal, though the throw pillows were in wrong positions. Bathroom untouched. Then I reached my bedroom. The jewelry box on my dresser sat open. Not just open, ransacked. Necklaces tangled together, earring backs scattered across the wood surface, rings missing from their slots. My mother's engagement ring was gone. I stood there for what felt like an hour but was probably 90 seconds, just staring at the empty velvet slot where the ring should have been. My brain kept trying to supply logical explanations. Maybe I moved it and forgot. Maybe I put it somewhere safe before I left. Maybe this is a nightmare and I'm still on the plane. But I knew. Deep in my stomach, in that place where truth lives before your conscious mind accepts it, I knew Derek had taken it. My hands were steady as I pulled out my phone. Surprisingly steady. I called him. He answered on the third ring, voice bright and casual. Hey. You get home okay? Where's Mom's ring? I asked. Silence. Long enough that I heard his breathing change. What ring? He finally said, but his voice had gone flat, defensive. Derek. Where is Mom's engagement ring? I don't know what you're talking about. We didn't touch anything. Maybe you lost it before. It was in my jewelry box. In my bedroom. Where you were staying. Where is it? More silence. Then I heard muffled voices. He'd covered the phone with his hand. A minute later, a woman's voice came on. Jessica. Natalie, hi. She sounded annoyed, like I'd interrupted her evening with trivialities. Derek said you're freaking out about some jewelry? He took our mother's engagement ring, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. Oh, that? She laughed. Actually laughed, this light, tinkling sound that made my vision go red at the edges. Yeah, I pawned it. We needed money for our kitchen remodel. You know how expensive contractors are these days. We're getting new countertops, quartz, it's going to look amazing, and the cabinets refaced. The pawn shop gave us $30,000 for it. Really good deal, actually. I couldn't speak. My throat had sealed shut. You'll get it back when we can afford it, she continued, like this was perfectly reasonable. Eventually. Don't worry about it. Derek's voice came back on, defensive and sharp. Stop being so dramatic, Natalie. It's just a ring. You're insured, right? This is why people get insurance. That's when something inside me went very, very cold. The rage didn't disappear, it crystallized. Hardened into something clear and purposeful. You're right, I said quietly. I do have insurance. I also have the security camera footage, the police report I filed this morning, and... I stopped. Let the silence stretch. And what? Derek demanded. Come to my apartment tomorrow morning. 10 a.m. Both of you. We're going to fix this. I hung up before he could respond. Here's what I didn't tell Derek, I'm methodical. Obsessively so. It's what makes me good at my job, attention to detail, preparation, documentation. After Mom died, I had all her jewelry appraised and photographed. I have certificates, receipts, professional valuations in a fireproof safe. I also have security cameras. 2 of them. One hidden in a bookshelf pointing at my bedroom door, another in a fake smoke detector covering the living room and hallway. I installed them after my apartment was broken into 2 years ago. The police never caught who did it, and I learned that security makes me sleep better. That night, after I hung up on Derek, I pulled up the footage. There they were, clear as day, timestamped Saturday afternoon. Derek entering my bedroom, opening drawers, lifting the jewelry box lid. Jessica joining him, pointing at specific pieces. Her mouth moving, I wished I had audio, then laughing, plucking out the engagement ring, holding it up to the light streaming through my window. Derek looked uncomfortable. His body language screamed hesitation, shoulders hunched, hands fidgeting. But Jessica kept talking, gesturing, and eventually he nodded. They took 3 other pieces too, Mom's pearl necklace, her sapphire earrings, a gold bracelet Dad gave her on their 20th anniversary. But the ring was the nuclear option. The irreplaceable one. I made copies of everything. Saved them to 3 different cloud accounts, emailed them to myself, put them on a USB drive. Then I did something I'd been avoiding since Mom passed. I called my father. Dad answered on the first ring. Natalie? It's late, sweetheart. Everything okay? No, I said. My voice cracked on the word, the first real emotion I'd let surface. Dad, Derek took Mom's ring. Silence. Then, what? I told him everything. The house sitting, the discovery, the phone call with Jessica. By the end, I was crying, angry tears that burned my cheeks. I have footage, I finished. Clear footage. And Dad, she pawned it. For a kitchen remodel. Mom's ring is sitting in some pawn shop because they wanted granite countertops. My father is not a violent man. He's a retired accountant who does crossword puzzles and volunteers at the library. But I heard something in his voice I'd never heard before. Give me the name of the pawn shop, he said. I don't have it yet. But Dad, I need you to trust me on something. Don't call Derek. Don't do anything. Just come to my apartment tomorrow at 10. Can you do that? Natalie, please. I have a plan. I need you to trust me. He was quiet for a long moment. Okay. I'll be there. After we hung up, I made one more call. My best friend Rachel, who also happens to be a family law attorney. I need to know my options, I said. Legally. If someone steals jewelry and pawns it, what happens? Grand larceny, Rachel said immediately. In this state, anything over $5,000 is a felony. Your brother's looking at serious charges. Why? What did he do? I told her. Oh my goodness, she breathed. Natalie, you need to file a police report immediately. Tonight. And you need to get that footage to them. Do you know which pawn shop? Not yet. But I'm going to find out. How? I smiled, though she couldn't see it. I'm going to ask nicely. Monday morning. 10 a.m. sharp. I'd been awake since 5, running on coffee and adrenaline, playing out scenarios in my head. Dad arrived first. He looked older than I remembered, gray hair thinner, lines deeper around his eyes. Grief does that, ages you in ways that have nothing to do with time. You look tired, he said, hugging me. I'm tired. I let him inside. But I'm more angry than tired. What's the plan? We're going to give them a choice. Derek and Jessica showed up 15 minutes late, predictably. Jessica wore designer sunglasses and carried a coffee cup from that overpriced place downtown. Derek looked like he hadn't slept well. Good. What's this about? Jessica demanded before I could even close the door. We have things to do today. This better be. She stopped when she saw Dad. Oh. Hi, Mr. Walsh. Her voice shifted, became syrupy sweet. I didn't know you'd be here. Sit down, Dad said. Not loud. Just firm. They sat. I remained standing, phone in my hand. Let's skip the pretending. You took Mom's engagement ring. You took her pearls, her sapphires, her anniversary bracelet. You pawned at least one of them, possibly all of them, and used my mother's jewelry to fund your kitchen renovation. That's insane, Jessica started, but Derek put his hand on her arm. Nat, listen, he began. No. You listen. I pulled up the video on my phone, turned it toward them. This is you, Derek, at 2:47 p.m. on Saturday, entering my bedroom. This is you, Jessica, at 2:51 p.m., taking the ring out of the jewelry box. I have 37 minutes of footage showing exactly what you took and when. The color drained from Derek's face. Jessica's jaw tightened. Security cameras, I continued. Hidden ones. You didn't notice because you weren't looking. You were too busy stealing from me. It wasn't stealing, Jessica said, but her voice had lost its confidence. We're family. We just borrowed. You pawned it, Dad interrupted, his voice shaking with controlled rage. You took my wife's ring. The ring I gave her. The ring Natalie inherited when her mother died. And you pawned it for kitchen counters. We were going to pay her back, Derek said desperately. We just needed. Where? I demanded. Which pawn shop? Give me the name right now, or I walk this footage to the police station 6 blocks away and file formal charges for grand larceny. That's a felony in this state, Derek. You're looking at up to 10 years. Jessica stood up abruptly. You wouldn't. We're family. Sit down, I said coldly. You lost the family card when you stole from me. Pawn shop. Name. Now. Derek's hands were shaking. Golden Valley Pawn. On Maple Street. We pawned it Friday. We have 90 days to buy it back. Receipt? At home. Go get it. Both of you. You have 1 hour. Come back here with the receipt, and we're going to drive to that pawn shop together. You're going to buy back every single piece of jewelry you took. All of it? Today. We don't have $30,000 just sitting around, Jessica protested. Then you're going to figure it out, I said. Take out a loan. Max out credit cards. Sell your car. I don't care. But you're getting Mom's ring back today, or I'm pressing charges. And Jessica? When this is over, if I ever see you near my home again, if you ever contact me for any reason, I will make it my life's mission to ensure everyone you know understands exactly what kind of person you are. She opened her mouth to argue, but Derek grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the door. 1 hour, I called after them. Clocks ticking. The door slammed behind them. Dad sat down heavily on my couch. You think they'll do it? They don't have a choice, I said. But Dad, I need to tell you something. I already filed the police report. He looked up sharply. Yesterday. Right after I found the footage. I gave them everything, the videos, the appraisals, the timeline. There's a detective assigned to the case. His name is Martinez. So why are we doing this? Why not just let the police handle it? I sat down next to him. Because I want Mom's ring back. If Derek gets arrested, the ring becomes evidence. It could be tied up for months, maybe years. This way, I get it back today, and I still have the option of pressing charges later if they try anything. That's smart. He paused. Your mother would be proud. And furious. But mostly proud. We waited. They came back in 43 minutes. Derek looked like he'd been crying. Jessica's face was set in stone, angry but defeated. Derek thrust a crumpled piece of paper at me. The receipt. I examined it. Golden Valley Pawn. 4 items listed, 1 platinum diamond ring, 1 pearl necklace, 1 pair sapphire earrings, 1 gold bracelet. Total loan amount, $30,000. Let's go, I said. We took 2 cars. Dad rode with me. I watched Derek and Jessica in my rearview mirror the entire drive, making sure they didn't bolt. Golden Valley Pawn was a squat brick building with barred windows and a flickering neon sign. Inside, it smelled like old leather and desperation. A man behind bulletproof glass looked up as we entered. "Help you?" he asked, bored. "We're here to reclaim items," Derek said quietly, sliding the receipt through the tray. The man examined it, then looked at Derek more carefully. "You got $30,000? "Yes." "Cash or card?" "Card. Multiple cards." What followed was possibly the most painful 20 minutes of Derek's life. He had to use 3 different credit cards to cover it. Jessica tried to leave twice, once to use the bathroom, once claiming she felt sick, but I blocked her path each time. "You're staying right here," I said. "You're going to watch every penny get paid back." The pawn shop owner returned with a brown envelope. Inside were Mom's things. I made Derek open it. Made him take out each piece and hand it to me, one by one. The bracelet first, tarnished but intact. The earrings, still in their velvet box. The pearls, luminous and perfect. Then the ring. Dad made a sound, something between a sob and a gasp, when I held it up to the light. The diamond caught the fluorescent glow, throwing tiny rainbows across the counter. "This is what you traded," I said to Jessica, my voice steady despite the tears burning my eyes. "This is what you thought was worth the same as new cabinets. Do you have any idea what this ring means? What it represented?" She wouldn't meet my eyes. "My father proposed to my mother on a beach in Maine," I continued. "It took him 3 years to save enough money for this ring. He worked double shifts, weekends, holidays. He was 26 years old and terrified she'd say no. She told me this story 100 times. She said yes before he even finished asking. She wore this ring every single day for 36 years. She was wearing it when she went into hospice care. We only took it off her finger after." My voice cracked. I stopped, breathed, continued. "After she died. And you looked at it and thought, countertops." Jessica's face crumpled. She started crying, big, dramatic sobs that echoed in the small shop. "I'm sorry," she choked out. "I'm so sorry. I didn't think." "No," I cut her off. "You didn't think. You never think. You're selfish and entitled, and you've been poisoning my relationship with my brother for 4 years." Derek flinched like I'd struck him. "We're done here," I said, carefully placing the jewelry back in the envelope. "Dad, let's go." But Derek grabbed my arm as I passed. "Nat, please. I know I messed up. I know I can't fix this. But you're my sister. Doesn't that count for something?" I looked at his hand on my arm, then at his face. He looked genuinely devastated, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Let me ask you something," I said quietly. "If Mom were still alive, if she were standing here right now, what would she say to you?" He didn't answer. Couldn't. "She'd say you broke her heart. And mine. And Dad's. She'd say family means protecting each other, not stealing from each other when it's convenient." I pulled my arm free. The Derek I grew up with would never have done this. But that Derek died somewhere along the way, and I don't know who you are anymore. I walked out. Dad followed. Through the glass, I could see Derek standing frozen in the middle of the pawn shop, Jessica trying to pull him toward the exit. We drove back to my apartment in silence. That night, I put Mom's ring in my safe deposit box at the bank. Too risky to keep at home now. Too many bad memories attached to the jewelry box on my dresser. Dad stayed for dinner. We ordered Vietnamese food and sat on my couch, not talking much, just being together. "What happens now?" he finally asked. "I don't know." I turned Mom's pearls over in my hands. I kept those out, planning to wear them. Derek's called me 6 times. Jessica's sent 4 text messages. I haven't responded. "Are you going to press charges?" I gave the detective permission to pursue the case if he finds additional evidence of theft or fraud. Apparently Derek and Jessica have a history of this, small stuff, mostly. Borrowing money they never repay, taking things from friends' houses. It's a pattern. Dad rubbed his face tiredly. "I didn't raise him to be like this. You didn't. You raised him to be good. Whatever happened, whoever he became, that's not on you." We finished eating. Dad left around 9, hugging me extra long at the door. "Your mother would be proud of how you handled this," he said. "You were strong. You were smart. You got her ring back." "I just wish she was here," I whispered. "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." After he left, I finally opened Derek's messages. The first few were defensive. "You're overreacting. We would have paid you back. Why are you being so dramatic?" Then apologetic. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please talk to me. Please." Then desperate. "Natalie, I'm your brother. Doesn't that mean anything? We used to be close. Remember when we were kids?" The final one, sent just 20 minutes ago. "Jessica and I are getting divorced. She admitted she pressured me into this. She said we'd blame it on you if you noticed, say you were paranoid or lying. I didn't want to do it. I feel sick about it. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to know I never wanted to hurt you." I stared at that message for a long time. Part of me, a small, naive part, wanted to believe it. Wanted to think Derek was the victim here, manipulated by a toxic spouse. But I kept coming back to the video footage. To his hands on my jewelry box. To the fact that he went through with it, regardless of who suggested it first. I typed back, "I need time. Don't contact me again until I reach out first." Could be weeks. Could be months. Could be never. Then I blocked both their numbers. 3 weeks later. I'm writing this from my apartment, Pepper curled up on my lap, Mom's pearls around my neck. I've worn them every day since the pawn shop. They feel like armor somehow. Protection. Derek respected my request. No calls, no texts, no surprise visits. Dad says he's living in a motel while the divorce proceedings move forward. Jessica's apparently telling everyone she's the victim, that I'm vindictive and cruel, that she borrowed the jewelry with permission. Let her talk. I have the footage. The police investigation is ongoing. Detective Martinez called last week to tell me they're building a case not just for the jewelry theft, but for fraud. Turns out Jessica pawned items belonging to her own mother last year and never reclaimed them. There's a pattern of financial deception dating back nearly a decade. Your brother might be able to make a deal, Martinez told me. Testify against his wife, receive reduced charges. But that's up to him and his lawyer. I thanked him and hung up. I don't know if Derek will take that deal. I don't know if I care. What I do know is this: the ring is safe. It's in a vault, protected by passwords and steel and security protocols. Someday, maybe I'll have a daughter, and I'll give it to her with the story of how Grandma wore it for 36 years and how I fought to get it back. Or maybe I'll keep it forever, a reminder that some things are worth fighting for. That family isn't just about blood, it's about trust, respect, loyalty. And when those things break, you don't have to keep pretending they're intact. Rachel came over last night with wine for her and sparkling cider for me. We sat on my balcony watching the city lights flicker. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "How you handled everything?" I thought about it. Really thought. "No," I finally said. "I regret that it happened at all. I regret that Derek made those choices. But the way I responded? Getting the evidence, confronting them, forcing them to pay it back? No regrets there. You could have just called the cops," Rachel pointed out. "And waited months for the ring to be returned as evidence? Or risked it being lost in the system? No. I needed it back immediately. I needed them to understand the magnitude of what they'd done." Rachel clinked her glass against my bottle. "To being a fighter." "To being a fighter," I echoed. This morning, I got a letter. No return address, but I recognized Derek's handwriting on the envelope. Inside was a single page, handwritten. "Natalie, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect you to ever trust me again. But I need you to know that I remember everything. I remember building forts in the basement. I remember teaching you to ride a bike. I remember sitting with you at Mom's bedside, holding your hand while she slept. I remember being your brother, not just in name but in action. I threw that away. I let someone else dictate who I was, what I did, how I treated the people I love. That's on me. No one else. If you never speak to me again, I understand. But if someday, years from now, you decide you want to try, I'll be here. I'll wait as long as it takes. I'm sorry doesn't cover it. But I'm sorry anyway. Your brother, Derek." I folded the letter carefully. Put it in a drawer. I'm not ready to respond. Maybe I never will be. But maybe, someday, when the anger has cooled and time has done its work, I'll pull out that letter and read it again. Maybe I'll pick up the phone. Or maybe I won't. The thing about trust is that it's like Mom's ring, precious, irreplaceable, and once you damage it, it never quite looks the same, even if you manage to repair it. Dad's coming over for dinner tonight. We're making Mom's lasagna recipe, the one with the 3 cheeses and fresh basil. We'll eat too much and talk about her, probably cry a little. And tomorrow, I'll wake up and go to work and live my life. I'll feed Pepper her medicine. I'll text Rachel stupid memes. I'll reorganize my apartment, again, because I still can't shake the feeling that the space was violated. But I'll also wake up knowing that I fought back. That I didn't let them get away with it. That I protected something precious, not just the ring but the memory of Mom and the principle that some lines cannot be crossed without consequence. Derek was right about one thing: I do have insurance. Against theft, against loss, against fire and flood and all the random disasters that can strike. But some things can't be insured. Some losses can't be calculated in dollars and cents. And some betrayals cut so deep that no policy in the world can make you whole again. I learned that lesson the hard way. But I learned it. And honestly, I think Mom would be proud. Update: it's been 6 months now. I'm adding this because people who know what happened keep asking me for updates, and I've realized that revenge stories don't really have endings. They have aftermaths. Consequences that ripple outward long after the initial splash. Derek and Jessica's divorce finalized last month. Messy doesn't begin to cover it. Jessica tried to claim half of Derek's inheritance from Mom, specifically, the portion Dad gave him to help buy their house. Dad intervened with documentation proving it was a gift with stipulations that it would be returned to the family if Derek's marriage ended. She got nothing. Jessica also tried to countersue me for emotional distress and defamation. Her lawyer dropped her as a client after seeing the security footage. Last I heard, she's moved 2 states away and blocked all of us on social media. Good riddance. Derek did take the deal Martinez mentioned. He testified against Jessica in the fraud case, providing evidence of other items she'd stolen and pawned over the years. In exchange, he received probation and community service instead of jail time. He has to attend therapy twice a week and pay restitution to 3 other people Jessica stole from using his name. He sent me the court documents. I don't know why. Maybe proof that he's trying to make amends, in whatever limited way he can. I still haven't responded to his letter. Haven't unblocked his number. But I haven't thrown away the letter either. It sits in that drawer, next to Mom's old watch and a photo of the 2 of us from before everything went bad. Dad says Derek asks about me every time they talk. Asks if I'm doing okay, if I'm still angry, if there's any chance I'll ever forgive him. Dad doesn't answer those questions. Just tells Derek I need time. Time. That word again. Rachel thinks I should at least talk to him. Not forgive, she clarifies. Just talk. Let him apologize in person. Closure, you know? But I'm not sure I want closure. Closure feels like accepting that this is how our story ends, with broken trust and stolen jewelry and a relationship shattered beyond repair. Maybe I'm not ready to accept that yet. Maybe I never will be. The ring stays in the safe deposit box. I've gone to see it 3 times, just to reassure myself it's real, it's safe, it exists outside of this nightmare. Each time, I hold it up to the light and remember Mom's hands, how they looked with that ring catching the sun while she gardened or cooked or reached out to hold mine. That's the thing Jessica never understood. It was never about the money. Never about the insurance or the appraisal value or the platinum setting. It was about the woman who wore it. The marriage it symbolized. The love it represented. You can't pawn that. You can't put a price tag on it and trade it for kitchen counters. And maybe that's the real revenge, not the police reports or the forced repayment or the divorce that followed. Maybe the real revenge is simply refusing to let them reduce something sacred to a transaction. Maybe it's continuing to wear Mom's pearls every single day, letting them remind me that some things are worth protecting, no matter the cost. Pepper's purring on my lap right now, kneading her paws against my leg. The medication worked, she's healthy and happy and has no idea about the chaos that swirled around her while she slept. Sometimes I envy her that ignorance. But mostly, I'm grateful I fought back. Grateful I didn't just accept the loss, file the insurance claim, and move on. Because every time I touch these pearls, every time I think about that ring safe in its vault, I remember that I'm not powerless. That I don't have to accept betrayal just because it comes from family. Derek wanted to know if family means anything. It does. It means everything. But it also means expecting better. Demanding better. And walking away when people fail to meet that standard, blood relation or not. So here I am, 6 months later. Still angry sometimes. Still sad sometimes. Still missing the brother I used to have while accepting that he might be gone for good. But surviving. Thriving, even. And that, I think, is its own kind of victory. Mom's ring is safe. Her memory is protected. And I learned that I'm stronger than I thought I was, strong enough to stand up to family, strong enough to demand justice, strong enough to live with the aftermath. That's worth more than any diamond. Even one worth $240,000. 3 weeks after I added that last update, my phone rang at 2 in the morning. Unknown number. Normally I wouldn't answer, but something made me pick up. Natalie? A woman's voice. Shaking. Unfamiliar. Who is this? It's Amanda. Derek's ex-girlfriend. From college. I sat up in bed, instantly alert. Amanda. I remembered her vaguely, sweet girl, art major, dated Derek for 2 years before he went to grad school. They'd broken up amicably, or so I thought. Amanda? Why are you calling me at 2 a.m.? I just saw your story online. Someone shared it in a support group I'm in. For people recovering from financial abuse. She paused, and I heard her take a shaky breath. Natalie, Jessica did the same thing to me. My blood went cold. What? When Derek and I were dating, junior year. He gave me a key to his apartment. I went away for spring break, left some jewelry there, nothing expensive, just sentimental stuff. My grandmother's locket, some earrings my mom gave me. When I got back, they were gone. Jessica wasn't in the picture then, I said slowly. Yes, she was. Derek didn't tell you? She was his study partner in his economics class. I met her twice. She seemed nice. Normal. But I always felt like she was circling, waiting. Amanda's voice hardened. After I left for spring break, Derek gave her his key because she needed a quiet place to study. He came home one day and found her going through my things. What happened to your jewelry? He claimed she panicked when he walked in, grabbed random stuff thinking it was hers. But it wasn't random, Natalie. She took specific pieces. The locket was engraved. The earrings were in a distinctive box. Derek made excuses, said she'd return everything, but she never did. He kept defending her, saying I was being paranoid. I closed my eyes. And you broke up with him. 2 months later. I couldn't trust him anymore. He chose her story over mine. And the way she looked at me afterward, when we ran into each other on campus. Amanda trailed off. She smiled. Like she'd won something. We talked for another hour. Amanda told me about the support group, about how many women had similar stories, partners who stole from them, pawned their belongings, justified it as borrowing or emergency situations. About how Jessica had a pattern, according to mutual friends from college. Small thefts. Strategic manipulation. Always finding men who wouldn't stand up to her. Derek was perfect for her, Amanda said bitterly. Conflict avoidant. Desperate to keep the peace. She probably spotted that in him the same way a predator spots weakness. After we hung up, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Derek's letter. About his claim that Jessica pressured him, that he didn't want to do it. How much of that was true? How much was just another excuse? I pulled out my laptop and started searching. Social media, old college forums, anything I could find about Jessica's past. And there it was, a trail of deleted posts, accusations that had been scrubbed but not quite erased. 3 different women mentioning missing items after Jessica had been in their apartments. One mention of a formal complaint filed with campus security that went nowhere due to lack of evidence. She'd been doing this for over a decade. And Derek had known, at least partially, since college. That realization hit me like physical pain. He didn't just make one mistake. He'd been enabling her from the beginning. I waited until morning to call Dad. Did you know about Amanda? I asked as soon as he answered. Silence. Then, quietly, yes. Dad. He told me after they got engaged. Said Jessica had made a mistake back in college, that Amanda had overreacted, that he'd forgiven her and moved on. Dad's voice was heavy with regret. I should have dug deeper. Should have asked more questions. Your mother was already sick by then, and I was distracted, and Derek seemed happy, and I just let it go. She's been stealing for years. From multiple people. There's a whole pattern. I know. Detective Martinez told me last week. They're looking into pressing additional charges, but most cases are beyond the statute of limitations. He paused. Natalie, your brother enabled this. He knew what she was capable of and married her anyway. That's on him. We hung up, and I made a decision. I unblocked Derek's number. Then I texted him, we need to talk. Today. Your place. Come alone. He responded immediately, okay. When? 2 p.m. Don't make me wait. Derek's motel room was exactly as depressing as I'd imagined. Beige walls, stained carpet, the smell of industrial cleaning products barely masking something worse underneath. He answered the door looking haggard, unshaven, eyes bloodshot, wearing the same shirt he'd had on at the pawn shop 6 months ago. Nat, he said, relief flooding his face. Thank you for. Amanda called me, I interrupted. Your ex-girlfriend from college. The one whose jewelry Jessica stole back then. All the color drained from his face. You knew, I continued, pushing past him into the room. You knew what Jessica was capable of before you married her. You knew she was a thief, and you married her anyway, and then you brought her into my home. It wasn't like that, Derek protested weakly. It was one time. She said she made a mistake. She apologized? To Amanda? She apologized to Amanda? He couldn't answer. That's what I thought. I sat down on the room's single chair, forcing myself to stay calm. You know what the worst part is? I was starting to feel bad for you. I read your letter, and I thought maybe Jessica really had manipulated you. Maybe you were a victim too. But you weren't a victim, Derek. You were an accomplice. That's not fair. His voice cracked. I didn't know she'd do it again. I thought she'd changed. People don't change when there are no consequences. You forgave her the first time with no accountability. You gave her permission to do it again by staying silent. I leaned forward. Tell me the truth. All of it? How many other times? He sat down on the bed, head in his hands. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then, 4 times that I know of for certain. Maybe more. My stomach lurched. 4 times. Her sister's wedding ring. She took it during Thanksgiving 2 years ago, said her sister never wore it anyway. Our neighbor's coin collection, he was elderly, showing it to us, and a week later some pieces went missing. Jessica's own mother's earrings, you know about those. And there were smaller things. Gift cards that disappeared. Cash from purses. She always had an explanation. Always made it sound reasonable. And you believed her. I wanted to believe her, he corrected miserably. Because if I admitted what she was doing, I'd have to admit I married someone capable of that. I'd have to leave her. Start over. And I'm not brave like you, Nat. I never have been. Bravery has nothing to do with it. Decency does. Basic human decency. I know. He looked up at me, tears streaming down his face. I know I failed. I failed Amanda, I failed our neighbors, I failed Mom's memory, I failed you. I have this list in my head of every person I've let down, and it just keeps getting longer. Good, I said coldly. You should remember them. All of them. Every single person Jessica hurt while you stood by and did nothing. What do you want from me? He asked desperately. What can I possibly do to make this right? You can start by testifying at Jessica's trial. Not just about my jewelry, about all of it. Amanda, your neighbor, her own sister. Everyone she's stolen from. You can make sure she actually faces consequences this time instead of moving to a new town and finding a new victim. Martinez already asked me to do that. I said yes. And you can accept that I might never forgive you. That our relationship might be permanently broken. That wanting forgiveness isn't the same as deserving it. He nodded slowly. I can do that. One more thing. I stood up to leave. Stop blaming Jessica for everything. Yes, she's a thief. Yes, she's manipulative. But you made choices. You chose to ignore red flags. You chose to protect her over protecting innocent people. Own that. Because until you do, you're just another version of the same problem. I left him sitting there on that motel bed, surrounded by the consequences of a decade worth of cowardice. Jessica's trial happened in late August. It wasn't just about my jewelry anymore. The prosecutor had built a comprehensive case spanning 12 years, 7 victims, and over $150,000 in stolen property. I attended every day of testimony. So did Amanda, who'd flown in from California specifically for this. We sat together in the gallery, 2 women connected by the same betrayal, separated by years but united in purpose. Derek testified on day 3. I watched him walk to the stand looking smaller somehow, diminished. When the prosecutor asked him to describe Jessica's pattern of theft, his voice was steady but hollow. She targeted people during vulnerable moments, he said. When they were traveling, or distracted, or going through difficult times. She'd befriend them, gain access to their homes, and take things she knew they valued. And you witnessed this behavior repeatedly over the course of your relationship? Yes. Why didn't you report it? Derek looked directly at me then. Because I loved her. Because I was ashamed. Because I kept thinking she'd stop if I just loved her enough. I was wrong. Jessica's defense attorney tried to paint Derek as unreliable, as a bitter ex-husband seeking revenge. But the evidence was overwhelming. Security footage from my apartment. Pawn shop records. Testimony from multiple victims. Text messages between Jessica and her sister joking about shopping in other people's homes. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced her to 6 years in prison with possibility of parole after 4, plus restitution to all victims. As they led her out of the courtroom, Jessica turned and locked eyes with me. She didn't look angry or remorseful. She looked calculating. Like she was already planning her next move. That look haunted me for weeks. It's been almost a year now since Derek's phone call. Since we're staying at your place this weekend turned into a year-long legal battle and family implosion, Dad and I have dinner every Sunday. We're working on a project together, scanning and archiving all of Mom's photos, creating a digital memorial. Last week we found pictures from her and Dad's honeymoon, Mom wearing that engagement ring and laughing at something off camera. She'd be furious about all this, Dad said, studying the photo. But she'd also be proud of you for fighting back. I'm not sure about the proud part. Most days I just feel tired. Derek and I are talking again. Not regularly, maybe once a month, awkward phone calls where we discuss weather and work and carefully avoid discussing anything meaningful. But it's something. A fragile beginning. He asked if he could come to dinner at Dad's house last month. I said no. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I understand, he said quietly. I'll keep trying anyway. Even if you never say yes. Rachel thinks I should give him another chance. People can change, she insists. He testified. He's in therapy. He's trying. Maybe. But trying isn't the same as succeeding. And I'm not required to be his rehabilitation project. Amanda and I have become unlikely friends. We text weekly, sharing stories about our lives now, our careers, our struggles with trust. She's engaged to someone new, someone who apparently returns her grandmother's locket to its proper place after borrowing it to show his mother how beautiful it is. That's how you know, she told me last week. When someone respects what matters to you even when you're not watching. I think about that a lot. The ring is still in the safe deposit box. I've thought about wearing it, about keeping Mom's memory physically close. But every time I consider it, I remember Derek's hands opening my jewelry box. Jessica's laugh on the phone. The weight of betrayal wrapped around my finger would be too heavy. So it stays in the vault, protected. Waiting for a future where maybe I'll have a daughter and I can give it to her with a full story, the love it represented, the theft it survived, the battle I fought to reclaim it. She'll understand that some things are worth fighting for, even when the fight costs you dearly. Especially then. Pepper's curled up next to me as I write this final update. She's older now, her face showing gray around the whiskers, but she still purrs contentedly, oblivious to the drama that swirled around her that weekend. Sometimes I envy her that innocence. But mostly I'm grateful I had the courage to stand up, speak out, and refuse to accept theft disguised as family loyalty. The detective told me last month that Jessica's been writing letters from prison. To Derek, to her sister, to several of her victims. All variations on the same theme: she's sorry, she's changed, she needs support to rebuild her life. Derek forwarded me his letter. Asked if I thought he should respond. That's your decision, I told him. But remember, she wrote to Amanda from college once, too. Apologized beautifully. Promised to return the jewelry. Never did. He hasn't responded to Jessica. Small victory, maybe. Or maybe just self-preservation finally kicking in. I've learned something through all of this, something that took months to articulate clearly. Revenge isn't really about making the other person suffer. It's about refusing to let them win. It's about protecting what's sacred and drawing boundaries and saying no further. I didn't destroy Derek's life, though I could have. I didn't pursue maximum charges against him, though I had evidence. I simply refused to absorb the loss, to quietly accept betrayal for the sake of keeping peace. That refusal was powerful. More powerful than any punishment I could have inflicted. And now, a year later, I'm rebuilding. Not the relationship with Derek, that might be beyond repair. But myself. My sense of safety. My ability to trust. It's slow work. Some days I still check the security cameras obsessively, even though no one has keys to my apartment except me. Some days I open the safe deposit box just to confirm the ring is still there. But some days I forget to check. Some days I go hours without thinking about it. Those days are victories too. Final note, to anyone reading this who's going through something similar, someone who's been betrayed by family, stolen from, manipulated, gaslit into thinking you're overreacting, listen to me. You're not overreacting. Your feelings are valid. And you have the right to protect what's yours, both physical possessions and emotional boundaries. Document everything. Trust your instincts. Don't let anyone convince you that family means accepting mistreatment. And if you have to walk away with your head high, knowing you did everything you could to preserve something precious. Some people will try to come back into your life. They'll apologize, promise change, beg for second chances. You don't owe them those chances. You don't owe them your forgiveness or your trust or your time. You only owe yourself healing. Protection. Peace. The ring stays in the vault. Derek stays at arm's length. Jessica stays in prison. And me? I stay strong? Because some battles are worth fighting. Some hills are worth dying on. This was mine. And I'd do it all again in a heartbeat. Update your security. Trust your gut. Protect what matters. And never, ever feel guilty for refusing to be a victim.